Hey guys, tonight we're going to whisper our way through the strangely soothing and sometimes slightly horrifying world of medieval beauty rituals. Imagine yourself standing in a cold stone chamber, a flickering tallow candle lighting your pale reflection in a brass mirror. A maid holds up a goose quill to help you trace the perfect curve of your non-existent eyebrows, and your skin smells faintly of vinegar, crushed almonds, and regret. You're not sick, you're sunning. You've just followed all the top beauty advice of 1347. Tonight's journey winds through rituals that involved leeches, burnt almonds, and a shocking number of things you'd normally find in a kitchen pantry or a physician's cabinet. You probably won't survive this skincare routine, but hey, it's historically accurate. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening in from somewhere special tonight, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where this little sleepy history club reaches. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You want to be beautiful in the year 1350. Start by looking vaguely undead. That's not sarcasm, it's social status. A pale complexion doesn't just suggest you've avoided sunburn, it loudly proclaims that you've never once harvested a beetroot or chased a pig through the mud. It says I spend my days inside tapestry-lined halls nibbling pears and not sweating. In medieval Europe, beauty was deeply tied to class, and nothing screamed upper crust louder than looking like you'd faint at the sight of a turnip. But how do you achieve that ghostly pallor when you were inconveniently born with ruddy cheeks or sun-darkened skin? That's where the fun begins. Some noble women started their day with a brisk splash of rainwater, if they could get it. According to some manuals, water collected at dawn was best. Apparently, it had more virtue before it touched anything sinful. Others preferred a concoction of milk and rose petals stirred together overnight and applied with bits of linen. And if those methods failed to lighten your complexion, you could always just drain your face of colour, literally. But we'll get to leeches soon. Even dietary choices were adjusted for the sake of beauty. Cool foods like cucumbers and lettuce were believed to preserve a pale, moist, feminine demeanour. Too many hot foods like garlic or red meat might bring colour to the cheeks, an unforgivable offence. Historians still argue whether this food-beauty connection was more symbolic than medical. But either way, there were women refusing a mutton pie in the name of elegance. It wasn't just about colour, it was about softness. Smooth, delicate skin told the world that you'd never had to scrub pots or hoe a field. To keep skin supple, some women turned to beeswax, mixed with animal fat. Others swore by mashed beans or crushed almonds, moistened with spring water, and dabbed gently onto the face. In one Flemish household book, there's even a recipe involving barley water and chalk. A modern dermatologist might weep, but back then it was cutting edge. Let's not forget the hairline. Yes, your complexion had to be pale, but your forehead had to be vast. In medieval thought, the forehead was a sign of intelligence and grace. The more of it, the better. So out came the tweezers. Women routinely plucked their hairlines up an inch or more. And if the hair didn't come willingly, they used vinegar to dissolve it, or blunt razors to shave it back. There are records of noble women holding their faces over steaming herbal pots to weaken the roots. Bonus, the steam helped open pores. Spa day. By now you're probably wondering what men thought of all this. Well, they weren't exactly uninvolved. Medieval literature is full of romanticised pale maidens with shimmering skin and long, fair hair. But in practice, most men also knew these routines were a bit much. There's a 14th century poem where a knight complains about his lady's cosmetics melting off during mass. She came in with lilies and left with beets, he sighs. Still, social pressure is a powerful thing. Just like today, beauty wasn't entirely about male approval, It was about other women. The court was competitive. One patch of rosy skin too many, and people might whisper that you were lustful, or worse, a peasant. Of course, not all regions agreed on what beauty meant. In southern Europe, slightly olive-toned skin was considered elegant. In the north, a dead fish pallor was preferable. There's even a strange but charming manuscript from Hungary describing the perfect skin as the shade of cheese left under the moon. No clarification on what kind of cheese. Historians still argue whether this is a translation error or just really niche dairy poetry. But whatever your regional flavour of lovely, it all started with the same goal arrays, all signs of labour exertion or biology. Your body wasn't just your own, it was a canvas for wealth virtue, and sometimes plain old envy. And as your handmaid folds away the linen cloths from your morning routine, and you sip your cup of tepid nettle tea, you pause to admire your reflection. Slightly greenish. Yes. Damp. Absolutely. But rest assured, no one will mistake you for someone who's ever churned butter. Mission accomplished. The next step in your medieval beauty ritual leeches. Yes, the squirmy little vampires of the freshwater world. You see, in a time when blood was thought to carry not just health, but mood temperament and cosmetic appeal, draining a little of it now, and then seemed like a perfectly reasonable thing to do, especially if your goal was that translucent candlelit glow. You sit very still as the healer's apprentice, barely older than a kitchen boy, carefully selects the plumpest leeches from a wooden bowl. They're wriggling slowly, almost lazily in water that smells faintly of pondweed and iron. She brings one to your cheek, and with a professional sigh, lets it latch on just below the jawline. A mild sting, then a warm trickle. You don't move. This is after all beauty work. This wasn't just some fringe village practice either. In the high courts of France and England, noble women requested facial leeching to drain impurities and lighten their complexions. Historians still argue whether the leeches were truly effective or merely symbolic, a kind of medieval placebo. But one thing's clear, it was absolutely a thing. The logic, if you want to dignify it with that word, rested in the medieval concept of the four humours: blood phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Imbalances were believed to cause illness, and according to some physicians, visible ugliness. A ruddy complexion, too much blood. Acne, probably bad bile. So you leech. It's oddly relaxing once you get past the twitching. You might think of it like a facial massage, just with fangs. The typical session lasted about 15 minutes. You'd sit in a high-backed chair, neck extended as leeches worked their way through your jawline, and sometimes even your temples. A small bowl was tucked beneath the chin to catch any errant drips chic. Afterward, a cloth soaked in vinegar and rose water was pressed to the wound, both to cleanse and to perfume. The scent was important. Smelling good, or at least not like a battlefield, was half the charm. And if the bleeding continued longer than expected, well, that was just your beauty working overtime. There's even a record of one particularly enthusiastic noblewoman in the court of Burgundy who insisted on leeching before dinner parties. To ensure she looked freshly drawn, a servant's diary notes dryly, "Whether this meant pale and serene or faint and dizzy is up for debate, but she apparently received many compliments." And if leeches weren't available, say if the household pond had frozen over, or someone's physician hoarded them all, you had alternatives. Small cuts could be made with tiny lancets around the cheeks or temples. One English beauty guide recommends letting 2 thimbles of blood each fortnight for best results. The measurement system is admittedly unverified. The church had opinions naturally. Some clerics believed that beauty for vanity's sake invited demonic attention. Others paradoxically considered these routines acceptable so long as they were done in moderation and within wedlock. Because nothing says matrimonial purity like draining facial blood into a porcelain bowl. Despite its reputation today, the leech was seen as a refined little helper. They were kept in specialised containers, fed carefully, and sometimes even named. There's a fascinating marginal note in a German apothecary's log that refers to Marta, a particularly reliable facial leech, whose bites heal without swelling. We can't confirm if Marta received a retirement plan, but it's nice to imagine. And here's where things get charmingly awkward. Leech accidents were surprisingly common. A poorly placed one could leave a bruise or worse attached somewhere embarrassing. There's one notorious case from a 14th century Italian novella where a young lady faints during a banquet, not from scandal or sickness, but because a forgotten leech had crawled down into her bodice hours earlier. She was revived with vinegar laughter and presumably a new shirt. Fashion responded to these beauty quirks in subtle ways. Ruffles around the neckline and high collars helped conceal any awkward marks. Women who had undergone facial bleeding might wear a gauzy veil to imply both modesty and mystique. If anyone asked, you could simply whisper that your complexion was still settling. You're starting to realise that in medieval Europe, beauty and mild physical distress went hand in hand. The goal wasn't just to look good, it was to look like you'd suffered tastefully for it. A pale face, delicate bruising, and the faint scent of lavender rose vinegar. That was high glamour. There's even some evidence that leeching made its way into matchmaking rituals. In certain regions of France, a young woman preparing to meet a potential husband might undergo a full facial bleed the day before. Better to faint from beauty than from nerves, one old proverb quips. It's unclear whether this was encouraging or just quietly bleak. And as you sit back, bandage gently wrapped around your jaw, you sip from a cup of broth laced with parsley and cloves believed to restore the blood you just lost, but in a more elegant pre-approved form. You're pale, you're fragile. You might pass out if anyone sneezes too hard. Perfect. Your cheeks may be delightfully drained of life, but you're not done yet. Now comes the colour correcting phase, the medieval version that is. It starts not in a cosmetics shop, but in the kitchen. Burnt almonds. Yes, really. While some might toss them on a pastry or into a travelling pouch for a sweet snack, you're here to grind them into dust and smear them on your face. Because what is makeup if not food that's changed careers? You shuffle into the scullery, trailing lace and candle wax, and wait for your serving girl to finish roasting a pan of almonds over the hearth. Once they're dark, almost charred, they'll be pounded with a mortar and pestle into a gritty, fragrant powder. This earthy substance, often mixed with honey or goose fat, forms the base of a pale foundation paste. Smooth it on with the edge of a linen cloth, and suddenly you've got yourself a creamy, matte look that says highborn and allergic to sunlight. This almond base wasn't just about colour, it also helped conceal blemishes and uneven skin. Combined with chalk powder or crushed eggshells, it could even give a pearlescent glow. Historians still argue whether these mixtures actually helped or simply clogged every pore from forehead to chin. But let's face it, when you're competing with women who paint their necks with vine ash, you're doing your best with pantry staples. For those with a bit more silver to spare, crushed pearls were the prestige option. Imported from far-off coasts and ground to a soft dust pearls powder, promised not only radiance, but spiritual refinement. After all, the pearl was a holy symbol, its whiteness represented purity, and what better way to display that than by smearing it across your jawline? Don't worry, your face will only mildly smell like fish and money. And we can't forget the supporting cast of cosmetic materials, lead white, for those who really wanted to commit to the undead aristocrat aesthetic, and orris root for a sweet floral scent. The lead, as we now know, was quite literally toxic, slowly seeping into the bloodstream and causing a delightful array of symptoms: headaches, nausea, eventual collapse. But back then it was known simply as Venetian chartreuse, and it was all the rage. If you had it shipped from Italy, you might even brag about it. Let's imagine your morning routine. You start with a thin layer of vinegar-rinsed water to awaken the skin. Then the burnt almond paste dabbed carefully onto your cheeks and forehead. A bit of pearl dust to set the look. And maybe if you're feeling extra fancy, a spot of rouge made from cochineal beetles or mashed raspberries applied in a subtle heart shape on each cheek. This isn't just skincare. This is theatre. But it doesn't stop at your face. Your décolletage, yes, we're using that word, is also primed. Some women used goose fat mixed with chalk to highlight the collarbone, while others preferred camphor powder for its cooling effect. There's even a recipe from a 13th century English herbal that recommends soot mixed with milk of almonds for evening out the neck. Not the sexiest formula, but hey, beauty is pain, and possibly also allergies. What's curious is how these rituals were passed around. Recipe books weren't always official tomes. Many were handwritten collections traded from sister to sister, lady to lady. Marginal notes in these cosmetic books sometimes reveal delightful asides like works well, but makes the dog sneeze, or best not worn near fire. A surprisingly practical community. There's also growing evidence that many of these concoctions were developed not by noble women, but by servants and herbalists. The noble lady was the face, but the real innovation happened below stairs. Burnt almonds. That was likely first used by a clever cook trying to repurpose a botched dessert. Crushed pearls. The idea likely came from someone who watched their mistress stare longingly at her jewellery. And while noble women spent hours perfecting their looks, peasant women had their own tricks. Less glamorous, perhaps, but equally resourceful. Onion peels for blush, clay for smoothing, and burnt bread crusts for an impromptu brow pencil. Necessity as ever was the mother of mild beauty innovations. Let's not pretend everyone approved. The church again had opinions with a capital O. There were sermons warning that painting the face was akin to lying. To decorate the skin is to invite the devil to dance. One monk wrote apparently deeply concerned with your cheekbones. But as long as you weren't wearing rouge to mass or seducing the bishop, most of society turned a blind eye. In private, women often traded their favourite recipes like gossip. There's even a letter from a Parisian noblewoman to her cousin in Avignon that reads, "I have enclosed the powder for your lips and a new almond cream that smooths the neck if used under the moonlight. Do not let your husband see it, lest he become suspicious of magic." Romance conspiracy. Hard to say. Delightful either way. You close your mirror, a polished shard of metal, not actual glass, and glance at your reflection. There's a shimmer on your forehead, a flush on your cheeks, and a slight nutty smell that makes you crave dessert. Perfect. No one needs to know that your radiant glow comes from crushed snacks and questionable chemistry. All they'll see is beauty, delicate, expensive and entirely unattainable without risking mild poisoning or spontaneous itching. And as you prepare to descend the great staircase to the evening meal, you pause at the top landing. You feel faint, not from hunger or nerves, but because your makeup might literally be smothering your pores. Ah, elegance. You descend the staircase slowly, your skirt whispering against the stone steps, your head held high and your hairline pulled halfway back toward your ears. It hurts a little, but beauty is rarely painless in 14th century Europe, especially when it comes to the forehead. The larger the forehead, the more noble the mind. That's not your opinion, that's just science. Or at least medieval science, which is kind of like regular science if it were filtered through astrology old books and wishful thinking. In the medieval mind, the forehead wasn't just where your thoughts lived, it was where your virtue and intellect visibly perched. A wide, high forehead suggested refinement, piety and seriousness. A low, natural hairline that meant you might be impulsive. Or worse, common. So every morning, after you've dabbed your cheeks with burnt almond paste and tried not to pass out from the vinegar fumes, you sit at your vanity table and begin the sacred ritual of forehead plucking. It begins with a chant. Not a holy one, more of a muttered complaint. Your maid approaches with a pair of iron tweezers, warmed slightly by the hearth to make the metal gentler on the skin. You close your eyes, breathe deeply, and she begins to pluck, one hair at a time. Your eyebrows are left alone for now, but the real work is at your hairline. The goal: a bald canvas extending 3 fingers width above the brows. This was considered ideal. Anything less might suggest you have thoughts too close to your eyes, or worse, peasant ancestry. Historians still argue whether the forehead plucking craze started with noble fashion, or whether it was the church's subtle way of encouraging modesty by discouraging sensual curls. Either way, the result was the same: thousands of women sitting quietly while their scalp was turned into a minimalist masterpiece. Sometimes the process was sped up with vinegar or quicklime. Yes, the same stuff used for cleaning outhouses and whitening walls. It stung badly, but the results were dramatic. A smooth, bare forehead, as untroubled as a field after harvest. You weren't alone in this pursuit. Queen Elizabeth of Bohemia was said to have one of the most elegant foreheads in Christendom. So flawless, in fact, that poets wrote couplets to it. One compared her brow to the moon over winter wheat, which sounds poetic until you remember that wheat fields are typically bald beige and full of crows. Men weren't entirely immune either. While they didn't pluck as often, some priests and scholars were noted for shaving their foreheads as a sign of humility, or maybe as a way to show they were just too brainy for bangs. There's even a painting in a convent library showing St. Jerome with a receding hairline so dramatic it might have been self-inflicted. Back to you. You've survived the plucking, but the area looks a bit inflamed. So you reach for a soothing salve, goose grease mixed with elderflower, maybe a touch of chamomile. Applied delicately with a duck feather, it cools the skin and makes you smell faintly of barnyard luxury. To frame the look, you'll need a headpiece. Today you select a crisp linen wimple fastened under the chin with silver pins. It hugs the scalp neatly, concealing the top of your head, while leaving your lovely, spacious forehead exposed to the admiration of dinner guests and passing friars alike. Of course, not everyone was a fan. Some chroniclers complained that high foreheads made women look like startled owls. One Italian satirist wrote a play featuring a character who keeps removing more hair each act until her eyebrows rest alone on a vast white field. It was meant to mock vanity, but audiences mostly took notes. This isn't just fashion, it's ritualized transformation. A woman's face, like her gown, was expected to conform to the values of her class. You had to appear distant from nature, separate from labour, and somehow above biology. Every hair removed was a step further away from the earth and closer to ideal. Interestingly, this aesthetic wasn't universal. In parts of Asia and Africa, high foreheads were not especially prized. Beauty took other forms, gleaming skin, elaborate braids, or vibrant textiles. But in Northern and Western Europe, the smooth brow was everything. It's the kind of detail you see in portraits. Noble women with long noses, small mouths, and domed brows that seem to hover above the face like thought bubbles. And like all trends, it trickled downward. Soon, even middle-class women in towns like Rouen or York were trying to extend their hairlines. Without the funds for proper tweezers or herbal salves, some turned to more desperate methods, burning the hair with candle soot or scraping it with blunt knives. Beauty on a budget. There's a darkly funny account from a Flemish diary where a young woman attempts to use quicklime unsupervised. She succeeds in removing her hairline and most of her eyebrows. She reportedly wore a veil for 6 weeks and claimed it was for Lent. But even accidents couldn't stop the trend. Like a modern Instagram filter, the high forehead became a marker of style that everyone chased no matter how uncomfortable the results. As you finish applying a little chalk dust to even out the newly exposed skin, you lean back in your chair and admire your reflection in the metal mirror. You look intelligent, ethereal, slightly startled, like you've just heard a lute solo you didn't ask for. Now that your forehead is a gleaming marble slope of social superiority, it's time to consider how to frame all that carefully curated paleness. Enter the veil. Or the hood. Or the veil and the hood, if you're feeling particularly devout/fashionable. In medieval Europe, head coverings weren't just about modesty, they were style statements, reputation shields, and sometimes emergency beauty interventions rolled into one. You open your carved walnut wardrobe and consider your options. There's the linen barbette, snugly wrapped around the chin like a medieval jaw trainer. There's the crespine, a kind of beaded net for your hair, which doesn't help you much since your hairline now starts somewhere behind your ears. Then there's your old reliable, a simple veil of soft wool gauze, gently yellowed from age and scented faintly with lavender and smoke. You choose the veil. Today it will act as a gentle frame for your massive forehead, and more importantly, hide the slightly red, slightly raw patches where your vinegar waxing didn't go quite to plan. Historians still argue whether veils were more about religious modesty or practical aesthetics, but one thing is certain, they did a fantastic job of covering a bad hair day, or a patchy scalp, or the unfortunate side effect of experimenting with lime paste without a mirror. In many parts of Europe, especially after the 12th century, it was unthinkable for a married woman to be seen in public with her hair loose. Loose hair meant wildness, passion, possibly paganism. You, however, are a paragon of order and grace, so your head must be wrapped like a delicate thought, neatly contained and properly pinned. But not all veils were created equal. Rich noblewomen often commissioned their veils from silk imported via Byzantine traders. Imagine yards of airy fabric as sheer as morning fog, and twice as moody dyed with rare herbs or left cloud white, for maximum contrast with your pearl-dusted face. Some even had threads of gold or tiny stitched patterns, elegant but subtle. After all, it wouldn't do to look like a walking altar cloth, and the way a veil was arranged said as much as its quality. High-arched veils that created a sort of halo effect were the Instagram filters of their day. They elongated the face-blurred harsh angles and made the wearer look both otherworldly and hard to talk to. Perfect. But let's talk about the hood for a moment. On colder days, or in towns where the wind turned every cobblestone corner into a small tornado, hoods were the go-to. Made of velvet or wool, lined with fur if you were lucky, and often designed to rest just so over the brow line. The popular liripipe style had a long trailing tail that could be wrapped, tied, or just left to dangle dramatically, like a very tired wizard's hat. One of the unintended but delightful side effects of these hoods, they hid everything. Not just unfortunate spots, but ears that had been burned during a misjudged attempt at curling with hot tongs, or eyebrows that had been accidentally overplucked in pursuit of artistic symmetry. Women learned to work these coverings with flair. A tilt of the hood could suggest mystery. A tucked veil implied humility. A peak of ear scandalous. There's a charming account from a 14th century French romance in which the hero falls in love, not with a lady's face, he hasn't seen it yet, but with the grace with which her veil bent to the breeze. Historians are divided on whether this was genuinely romantic or just the result of a very long Lent. In court, veils and hoods were often colour-coded. White for purity, blue for devotion, green for hope or fertility, depending on who's asking. Red only if you were married brave or a bit of a flirt. You choose blue today because your mood is somewhere between holy widow and I haven't eaten in 6 hours. Your veil helps frame your look, but it's also functional. It keeps ash out of your eyes during long sermons. It keeps lice from jumping over from less refined heads. And importantly, it gives you an excuse to avoid speaking to anyone. Just lower the edge slightly and pretend you're praying or admiring the tilework. Hair was complicated, and hiding it kept things simple. Noble women often had their heads shaved partially to keep the hair thin and manageable under all the linen and velvet. Hair care was minimal at best: egg yolk, for shine maybe some rosemary-infused oil if you were feeling fancy, but mostly you covered and prayed it didn't tangle. Interestingly, in some households, the veil doubled as a sleep bonnet. Women wore softer versions to bed, to keep lice at bay, and protect whatever mild waves they'd coaxed out of their mostly hidden hair. There's even a surviving veil from a noblewoman's trousseau that has embroidered corners with the words for dreams and modesty. Whether that was romantic or passive-aggressive is anyone's guess. So here you are now, wrapped, pinned, swaddled in soft folds of cloth that smell of rose petals and soot. You look gentle, reserved, and like you haven't raised your voice since the last harvest festival. And if someone asks why you're wearing such a heavy hood indoors, you can simply smile and say, "The wind does not rest, nor do I." Very mysterious, very stylish. Let's pause here, not rest, you've still got a full medieval beauty routine to survive, but to take a whiff. Because if there's one thing that sets your current look apart from, say, someone gently decomposing, it's the bouquet of tonics layered lovingly across your skin. Vinegar, saffron, occasionally boiled milk, all mingling in a fragrance that says I'm rich enough to smell weird on purpose. You sit at your table elbow, gently resting on a velvet arm cushion, and gaze at the apothecary box before you. It's filled with tiny glass vials, cork-stoppered, and labelled in Latin, or something pretending to be Latin. There's one labelled Aqua Angelica, another marked with a crude drawing of a flower that looks suspiciously like a turnip. You begin your evening application. First a wash made from steeped rose petals and sharp wine vinegar diluted with rainwater collected from the western side of the house. Why that side? Because a 14th century physician claimed the west wind made water more balancing to the female humours. Historians still argue whether this had any measurable effect, or was just a poetic way to keep women busy while their husbands debated Latin grammar. This rose vinegar tonic tightens, the skin tingles slightly red, stings like regret, and was believed to close the pores to both dirt and sin. You dab it carefully around the mouth and temples, using a scrap of clean wool. The sensation is refreshing, if mildly alarming. Then comes saffron, yes, the actual spice. Crushed into a powder mixed with milk or goose fat, it creates a golden paste meant to invigorate the complexion. It smells divine, like something between a pudding and a ceremonial altar. Some women used it to tint the skin, slightly creating an illusion of vitality that didn't go too far. Too much colour, and you risked looking sinful. But just a touch that suggested youth grace and possibly divine favour. Your next potion is far stranger, a tonic of steeped white lily bulbs, vinegar and powdered sugar. It's meant to soften the cheeks and lighten the soul, according to the little notebook your maid reads from, written, apparently, by a monk who dabbled in dermatology. The paste goes on thick dries into a pale crust and flakes off in little bits like regretful pastry. But afterward your skin feels smooth, slightly tight, not unlike parchment. Excellent. Still, for all their poetic promises, these tonics were a gamble. Some worked, others caused burning, blistering, or simply made you smell like pickled salad. Women swapped recipes like secrets some whispered from nursemaids, others scribbled between psalms in the margins of devotional books. The line between skincare and alchemy was porous. A charming record from 1321 tells of a noble woman in Ghent who used a tonic of violet oil, elderflower, and powdered lead. She swore it made her glow. Her physician swore it gave her tremors. She lived to the age of 42, which was either a miracle or a testament to strong constitution and mild denial. And of course there were the trendsetters ladies who went beyond the kitchen herbs and into full experimental territory. One countess reportedly tried powdered coral. Another mixed crushed snail shells with vinegar for a firming wash. No record remains of how well this worked, but a side note mentions that her dog refused to sit on her lap afterward. It's worth noting that many of these tonics doubled as perfume. Personal hygiene, as we define it today, was a bit medieval. Baths were rare, partly because of limited plumbing, but also because too much bathing was believed to weaken the body's defences. Opening the pores invites the plague, one 14th century hygiene guide warned. So instead you doused yourself in layers of scent and hoped no one noticed the rest. Tonics also served a ceremonial function. Before marriage, a woman might apply a saffron milk wash to bless her beauty. Before childbirth, she might wear a paste of vinegar and lavender on her temples to soften the humours. And before attending court, she might layer several of these concoctions to prepare both her face and her patients. One particularly odd recipe preserved in a monastery's recipe book suggests boiling rosemary egg yolk and mashed lentils into a thick waxy balm. This was to be applied upon the full moon for the best results. Why the moon? Because lunar pull was believed to influence both fertility and skin elasticity. Historians still argue whether this is rooted in medical astrology, or just gave women a nice excuse to avoid socialising during a lunar cycle. But beyond the science, or pseudoscience, there was something quietly meditative about it all. The measuring, the warming, the slow stirring of tonics and pastes. It was a ritual, a kind of control in the world filled with chaos, superstition, and surprisingly aggressive geese. You finish your final rinse with a splash of mint water. It tingles, clears your head, and masks the sharper vinegar notes. You smell, if not inviting, at least very busy. Like someone who owns an herb garden and possibly speaks to her creams. And as you blow out the candle beside your mirror, the light flickering across your golden-tinged cheekbones, you feel a quiet pride. You've survived another night of medieval skincare, without losing consciousness or catching fire. Progress. Let's be honest by now. You've layered your face with vinegar almonds, powdered pearl, and possibly a dash of snail shell essence. Your pores are more confused than cleansed. But what about the rest of you? Welcome to the scent management portion of your medieval beauty routine, because despite what the frescoes suggest, the average 14th century noblewoman sweated just like everyone else. The only difference, she wasn't allowed to look or smell like it. Bathing was tricky. Full immersion baths were rare, and in many places frowned upon. Not because people didn't enjoy them, many did, but because they were considered dangerous to health. There was a widely held belief that heat opened the pores too much, allowing illness, bad spirits, or stray humours to enter. A chill after a bath could turn into pneumonia. A bath too long could weaken your liver. Bath too close to menstruation. Utter catastrophe. So instead of soap and water, you manage body odour with clever disguises and aromatic accessories. You start your day by slipping a sachet of herbs, often rosemary, lavender, or crushed marjoram, into your bodice. Not pressed against your skin, of course. That might cause a rash. No, the sachet is stitched into the linen underlayer, resting near the sternum like a fragrant secret. Next you dust under your arms with a blend of ground iris root and dried rose petals. It smells delicate at first, but gets surprisingly pungent after an hour in a crowded banquet hall. You tuck an extra sachet into your sleeve, just in case. Still, your best weapon against sweat isn't what you wear, it's what you avoid doing. In medieval court life, moving too quickly was considered inelegant. Nobility strolled, they lingered. They gestured slowly and sat gracefully. Mostly to look superior, but also because no one wanted to risk a visible sweat patch on their brocade. Your garments help too. Linen underdresses wick away moisture, quietly acting like medieval performance wear. Over those you layer velvet or wool materials, that can absorb a fair bit of scent before they turn treacherous. You also rotate outfits daily, not out of vanity, but because reuse without a day's airing might result in a scent best described as floral stable. But let's say you do find yourself in need of a touch-up mid-event. You might excuse yourself to the ladies' chamber, where you'll find a communal basin of rosewater and a stack of cloths. Dab, don't scrub. You're refreshing, not laundering. Still, the real flex is scent-based misdirection. This is where medieval perfumery shines. Women created signature blends by infusing alcohol or oil with spices and herbs, cinnamon, cloves, dried lemon peel, or even pine resin. These mixtures aged in little glass vials until ready for dabbing behind the ears or brushing into hair. A popular blend in the courts of Aragon reportedly included nutmeg sage and something ominously described as amber fluid. Historians still argue whether this was whale secretion or just ambitious labelling. You carefully unstop your own vial, now a heady mixture of elderflower and camphor. It smells both medicinal and vaguely romantic. You dab some on your wrists. This will confuse people into thinking you've recently passed through a monastery garden or kissed a bishop's ring. Then there's your mouth. To freshen breath, you chew on fennel seeds or cardamom pods tucked discreetly under your tongue. Mouthwash. As we know it, didn't exist, but some women used a rinse of wine and mint or vinegar and cloves brushing. Well, there were twigs. You might chew the end of one until it frayed, then run it across your teeth with hopes and prayers. Tooth powders existed too, made from crushed bone or burnt bread. They were effective but abrasive. Many a smile in medieval portraits is closed-lipped for a reason. Despite the limitations, cleanliness was not a lost concept. Many noble women prided themselves on appearing fresh, even if that freshness came from layers of herbs, lace and deceit. There's a letter from an English nobleman who praises his betrothed for smelling like morning under oak trees. Whether that means clean or mossy remains unclear, but the sentiment holds. Even sleep was scented. Before bed, you burn a little sage or lavender near your chamber pot, both for the smell and for the supposed protection against bad dreams. Some women even stuffed their mattresses with dried rosemary and thyme. As you lie down, the scent rises, softly cloaking you in invisible elegance. But of course not everyone followed the rules. There's a delightful tale from the court of Navarre about a lady-in-waiting who wore no perfume at all, relying instead on her naturally mild scent and frequent linen changes. She was considered shockingly bold. One courtier wrote, "She smelled only of clean air and sun-warmed sheets a novelty." A backhanded compliment, if ever there was one. You, however, prefer the classics. Your scent tonight is something between lemon balm and well-aged parchment. You imagine it trailing behind you like a ribbon as you pass through doorways. You are soft, elusive, not sweaty in the slightest. And if someone raises an eyebrow when you refuse to dance, you simply smile serenely. Heat disturbs the humours you whisper. Then turn away, letting the air carry your perfume and your mystery in equal parts. Tonight's look wouldn't be complete without just a hint of colour. Not too much, mind you. This is 14th century Europe, and anything beyond a whisper of pink might suggest you've been cavorting with poets or drinking spiced wine without supervision. But still, your cheeks need a touch of life, if only to convince others you're not in fact already embalmed. Welcome to the delicate and morally murky world of rouge, the red stain of nobility flirtation and occasional ecclesiastical judgment. You lean over your carved box of pigments, lids tight with beeswax seals. One little pot contains powdered cochineal, crushed beetles imported at great cost from the east. Another has dried mulberries steeped in rose oil. Then there's the humble beetroot pounded and strained through linen, yielding a stain so deep it might outlast your patience. The question, of course, is how red is too red. Historians still argue whether rouge was officially sanctioned or merely tolerated. In some courts, it was expected subtle colour on the cheeks and lips showed vigour and wealth. In others, particularly under the watchful gaze of reformist clergy, it was condemned as vanity at best, witchcraft at worst. But tonight you're not feeling very pious. You reach for the beetle dye, just a dab applied with the corner of a lace cuff. A single blot on each cheekbone, then smoothed with the edge of a warm silver spoon. The result is charming, a slight bloom of health, as if you've just returned from a brief and tasteful stroll, perhaps near lavender bushes. You are glowing politely. Colour in medieval beauty theory was a paradox. Too pale, and people whispered you were ill. Too flushed, and they muttered about sin. There was a narrow, sweet spot, just between ethereal, and maybe she touched a priest's hand too long, and finding that shade was an art form. The ingredients varied by region. In southern France, women favoured red wine reductions. In the chilly towns of the Low Countries, crushed rowan berries made a frequent appearance. And in certain parts of Italy, women dabbed on mixtures that included powdered brick, a risky choice both for the skin and for anyone who mistook your face for a wall in need of mortar. In addition to the cheeks, lips often got a touch of rouge as well. Not the lush red of modern lipstick, but a soft tint, something that suggested warmth and fullness without drawing attention. One popular method involved staining the lips with elderberry juice, followed by a dusting of flour to fix the colour. Another guide recommends rubbing the lips with a cut apple, then pressing a warm cloth against them. The result satisfyingly pink, mildly sticky. But even in their most muted forms, these enhancements carried risk, not just to your skin, but to your reputation. A lady whose cheeks flushed too visibly might be accused of immodesty. Only wine and wickedness bring such colour, one friar wrote. As if human biology was somehow a moral failing. This wasn't just a religious thing. Secular etiquette books often warned women to avoid the look of the tavern girl. That meant no heavy rouge, no exaggerated mouth stain, and absolutely no kohl around the eyes, unless you were either morning or Mediterranean. So why use rouge at all? Because beauty was performance. At court, you needed to look alive, alert, and gently appealing, even if you were in fact bored to tears and dreaming of soup. The right flush signalled vitality. It said, I'm healthy, I'm desirable, and no, I don't pluck my hairline in public. And then there was the flirtation factor. A well-placed flush was an invitation. A demure one, of course. The kind that says I might faint, if you quote Virgil at me again. During feasts, candlelight made rouge shimmer softly, especially if your pigment had been mixed with a drop of egg white or goose fat. A risky choice in hot rooms, but mesmerising when applied correctly. There's even a story from the Burgundian court about a lady who stained her cheeks with crushed poppy petals only to find that her blush turned a vivid purple under candlelight. She was accused of sorcery, but also proposed to 3 times that month. Trade-offs. To protect your reputation while wearing rouge, you often relied on subtle cues. The veil again comes to your aid. You let it drape loosely around your cheeks, creating the illusion of a natural flush, without revealing the dye beneath. If anyone catches a glimpse of red, you feign surprise. Must be the cold, you murmur, fanning yourself slowly. Men didn't escape this game entirely. While they rarely wore visible cosmetics, a faint dusting of powder on the cheeks, just to remove shine, was not unheard of. Nor was tinting the lips with wine before a romantic encounter. One bishop famously warned young clerks to avoid women with lips stained like martyrs' robes and breath that smells of berries. Whether he was dissuading them or merely reminiscing is unclear. And of course there were the rebels. Some women embraced full colour pairing, crimson cheeks with bold gold thread gowns and elaborate hairstyles. These women were often admired publicly and gossiped about privately. A few even wrote beauty guides of their own, compilations of recipes, rituals and warnings. One Milanese noblewoman ends her book with this phrase, "Use rouge as you would fire, never unwatched." So you sit now rouged, just enough to pass inspection, flushed, just enough to hint at vitality but not desire. You glance sideways at the mirror. Your cheeks bloom faintly. Your lips look kissed by autumn. You could pass for healthy, or secretive, or maybe just someone who wandered too close to a raspberry tart. Perfect. You've mastered pallor, faked modest rosiness, and kept your forehead so smooth it practically echoes. But now it's time for one of the more daring steps in your medieval makeover, the glow-up. No, not the figurative kind, the literal kind. You want your skin to shine, gleam, reflect torchlight like freshly scrubbed alabaster. And you're going to need eggs, a lot of eggs. You sit before your mirror, still not. Glass, still a slightly warped disc of polished bronze, and crack a raw egg into a tiny ceramic bowl. Carefully you separate the yolk, letting it ooze away, while you collect the clear, sticky albumin. This, dear listener, is your highlighter. Egg white was the poor woman's facelift, the medieval smoothing serum, the instant tightener for jowls and jawlines. Applied thinly to the face, it dried quickly, pulling the skin taut and giving it a glossy sheen that could fool candlelight into thinking you were 20 and morally upright. Best of all, it flaked off with a gentle rub and a bit of rose water. No harsh chemicals, just omelette residue. But egg white wasn't your only option. For those with a more reckless budget and a looser interpretation of health, there was Venetian Carouse. This infamous beauty product, a compound of white lead and vinegar, gave wearers a near translucent finish, bright and haunting as moonlight on marble. It also unfortunately caused lead poisoning. Historians still argue whether medieval women understood the danger, or simply chose to ignore it in favour of looking divine. Symptoms included muscle weakness, hair loss, memory trouble, and ironically, skin deterioration. But none of that shows up in oil portraits, and besides, if your cheekbones could cut glass, wasn't that worth a little organ failure? You've opted not to risk the lead today. Good for you. But you still want that glow. So you reach for another favourite bismuth powder. Not quite as deadly as Carouse, and often mixed with rose oil to tone down the metallic smell. It leaves your face faintly pearly, like a shell that's been whispered over by mermaids. You smooth it gently over the egg white base. The sensation is cool and oddly comforting. Your face stiffens into what modern influencers might call snatched, though you'd probably say serene and unbothered. You can't raise your eyebrows anymore, but that's fine, you plucked most of them off anyway. Next comes a curious fringe technique, the pale line contour. Before the Renaissance gave us blushes and bronzers, some women enhanced their facial structure by using subtle differences in mattifying. Dabbing extra chalky powder beneath the cheekbones made the upper part of the face look fuller. It was a low-tech contour, one part art, one part desperation. And where the egg white tightens a bit of vinegar gel, boiled with herbs and thickened with flour, softens. Applied around the temples and jawline, this strange medieval goop promised to restore roundness and purity of youth. Whether it worked or just smelled like salad dressing is up for debate. Then there's mercury sublimate, occasionally used by those pursuing the most aggressive glow. It whitened skin rapidly. It also unfortunately caused your teeth to loosen. But glowing skin and fewer chewing responsibilities. Some women considered that a win. You wisely skip the mercury. Instead you finish your look with a dab of ox gall, the filtered bile from a cow's stomach used to make a kind of setting serum. Before you recoil, remember, this was the secret behind that glossy, almost wet-looking finish you sometimes see in medieval manuscripts depicting the Virgin Mary. Did she sparkle because of divine light, or ox-gall historians still argue? And just when you think your face has endured enough chemistry for one evening, your maid approaches with a small, flat iron spatula. It's been warmed near the hearth and is used to press the layers of product gently into the skin like a makeup blender but scarier. The result? Even texture, faint sheen, and a strangely calming smell of breakfast. Now to the lips. You want them soft, full, and faintly pink but not suspiciously red. You reach for a linen pouch containing pigeon fat mixed with honey. Applied like a balm, it softens cracked skin and catches light beautifully. There's also a touch of beeswax for that smooth barrier finish. And if you're feeling bold, you add the tiniest dab of crushed mallow flower juice. The colour is barely perceptible, but under firelight it gleams. It says I'm approachable but mysterious, like a riddle wrapped in velvet. This entire procedure takes about an hour longer if you're interrupted by prayers or household squabbles. But once it's complete, the result is undeniable. You are radiant. You shine with an inner light that may actually be from residual egg, but still radiant. As you stand careful not to wrinkle the tautness of your jaw, you catch a glimpse of your reflection once more. The glow is there. Ethereal. Slightly edible. You move slowly toward the door, hoping not to sweat or smile. Smiling cracks the egg layer. And if someone asks why your face looks like it's been gently shellacked, you simply raise one delicate hand and murmur, "My soul reflects what God has made." Then pivot gracefully, careful not to knock anything over with your stiffened veil. The glow is perfect, for now. You've made it through glow-up territory, intact, egg-white mask uncracked, and cheek flush still suggestive of dignity rather than sin. But now we venture lower closer to the brows, the chin, and all those delicate places where nature has a habit of interfering with medieval ideals of smoothness. That's right, it's time for facial hair maintenance. In this era, a woman's face is expected to resemble a candle, smooth even, and incapable of growing anything spontaneously. And so begins the tedious art of tweezing, threading, and removal, all done without magnifying mirrors, artificial lighting, or mercy. You start with the eyebrows, which are supposed to arch gently, softly framing the massive tundra of your forehead, but never asserting themselves too boldly. You reach for your set of metal tweezers, pinched from a travelling merchant, who claimed they were forged by monks they were not. Each pull sends a sharp pinch through your brow bone, but you soldier on. After all, bold brows are for witches and widows. There's no standard eyebrow shape here, regional trends vary. In northern France, a soft curve is preferred. In the English court, thin lines are more popular, creating a look of perpetual curiosity or concern. And in some parts of Spain, women darken their brows with burnt clove ash or lamp soot, then wipe most of it off to leave a ghostly suggestion of expression. Historians still argue whether this was considered flirtatious, or simply the result of poor lighting. Your next target is the upper lip, where a hint of fuzz could unravel an entire marriage proposal. For this tweezing works, but threading is better. You fetch a long strand of silk thread from your sewing basket, twist it tightly between your fingers, and begin the slow, pinching glide across your skin. Threading may have reached Europe through trade routes from the Middle East, where it had been practiced for centuries. In fact, it's widely believed that noble women in the Crusader states adopted the technique, bringing it back as a souvenir from a land that had far more exciting cosmetics. You, of course, have never left your region, but your maid's cousin once served in a household where a Moorish physician taught threading to the entire staff. Thus the knowledge trickled upward, as so many things do. You continue wincing slightly as the thread snaps another tiny hair from the root. It's tedious, yes, but effective, and oddly meditative, a kind of prayer made of pain. Now for the chin, where whispers of hair sometimes appear, especially with age. You pretend not to notice, but you do. Everyone does. And so you apply a sugar paste, a mix of honey, lemon juice and flour, boiled to a sticky goo, and cooled just enough to remain spreadable. You press it onto the area count to 10, in Latin for formality and rip. Silence. Then a quiet sniffle. It worked. And here's where things get unexpectedly advanced. Some women used abrasion. Stones, smooth pieces of pumice, gently rubbed over the jawline to polish the skin. The friction removed both hair and the top layer of dignity. You have one such stone gifted by an aunt who claimed she got it from a bishop's mistress. It smells faintly of sulphur and ambition. Of course, not all women had access to these tools. In rural towns, a mix of vinegar and walnut shells was used to scrub away facial hair. In more experimental circles, boiled onion juice was applied to weaken follicles. One particularly brave noblewoman even tried garlic and lye. Her diary entry reads, "Redness severe, but smoother, we'll take her word for it." The church, ever eager to weigh in, considered excessive hair removal a sign of pride or possibly vanity demonic in origin. But moderate grooming was allowed, especially if it aided marriage or elevated the soul through cleanliness. The line between cleanliness and sin, you'll note, was about as fine as your newly threaded brow. There were, of course, those who resisted these standards. Some older women embraced their natural hair growth with stoic pride. There's a record of a widow in Normandy who allowed her chin hair to grow in testament to her wisdom. She became something of a local curiosity known as La Dame Poilue. Children were said to rub her chin for luck. You are not La Dame Poilue. Your upper lip is now smooth. Your chin flawless. Your eyebrows look surprised, but in a dainty I just heard a charming rumour way. You lean closer to the mirror and examine your handiwork. There's a faint redness, yes, a mild sting. But your reflection is that of a noble woman untouched by the troubles of biology. To finish, you dust your face with calamine powder harvested from crushed zinc ore and mixed with lavender oil. It cools the skin, evens the tone, and most importantly smells expensive. You allow yourself a moment of vanity, admiring the way the candlelight dances across your now featherless jaw. You imagine the barons and dukes at the feast, noticing your glow and thinking, "She seems intelligent, emotionally stable, and almost suspiciously hairless." And you'll smile, just a little, because you've earned it. Your face is now smoother than a sermon at Lent, but one rogue element threatens to undo the entire illusion of spotless refinement, freckles. Those sun-kissed specks, charming in a shepherd boy, are less welcome in the candlelit chambers of nobility. In the medieval mindset, freckles were a problem evidence of too much sun, too little virtue, or worse, a slightly too active liver. You sit back in your carved oak chair, eyes narrowing at the tiny constellations scattered across your nose and cheeks. They don't scream peasant exactly, but they do whisper outdoors. And in your world, that's not a compliment. So begins your campaign against the freckle. You start, as always, with a tonic. This one is a mixture of vinegar, parsley juice, and milk curd left to sit on the windowsill for exactly 3 days. According to the parchment recipe, pressed between the pages of your Book of Hours, the curd must be stirred with a birch twig cut during a waxing moon. Historians still argue whether this lunar detail had any practical use or simply made the process feel more mystical. You apply it now carefully, soaking a scrap of linen and pressing it to the freckled area. It smells challenging, like sour hope. You hold it there for 10 minutes, breathing through your mouth, and try not to think about how much this resembles pickled cheese. Freckle removal lore was rich and varied. In Italy, lemon juice and crushed eggplant were favourites. In England, a paste made from horseradish root and stale ale was all the rage, though more often it just caused redness and regret. There's even a record of a Bohemian noblewoman who rubbed her face with the inside of a frog skin, claiming it drew out the sun's mischief. No word on whether the frog gave its consent. Your own method is safer, but no less peculiar. After the curd treatment, you rinse your face with water that's been infused with crushed violets and fennel seed. This floral rinse was thought to lighten spots, soothe the skin, and attract compliments from monks. Whether it works or not is beside the point. The ritual is everything. Still some freckles remain. Persistent. Cheerfully pigmented. You reach for Plan B, camouflage. This involves white lead paste, lightly applied with a goose feather brush. You trace delicate swirls over each spot, blending the pigment into the surrounding powder, until your skin resembles the parchment pages of a particularly expensive psalter. Smooth, uniform, dangerously opaque. But even you know the risks. Your cousin once wore ceruse too thick, and after a long summer feast it cracked mid-conversation, revealing a constellation of freckles beneath. The horror. One guest dropped his goblet. You opt for a more moderate approach, just enough paste to blur the freckles without transforming your face into a cathedral wall. You dust lightly with flour and iris root to set the look. And yet, not all opinions about freckles were grim. In some quarters they were considered charming nature's own embroidery. Poets occasionally praised sun-kissed skin, though more often when writing about milkmaids or tragic heroines than actual ladies of court. In one curious Iberian text, a knight describes his beloved's freckles as stars guiding him through temptation. She later becomes a nun. There's a kernel of rebellion in letting freckles show. Some women did just that, especially in more rural estates where sun exposure was unavoidable, and vanishing creams were harder to come by. There's even a record of a German duchess who refused to cover hers, claiming they proved she read books outdoors. "Let men dream of paleness," she once said, "but marry someone warm." A scandalous sentiment. Still tonight, you choose conformity. The freckles are not gone, but they're hidden gently, skillfully behind layers of paste and powder. You lean into the mirror and inspect your work. Satisfactory. You look like someone who's never set foot beyond a shaded arbour. To further distract from any remaining specks, you reach for beauty patches, tiny cutouts of velvet, or silk glued delicately to the skin with pine resin. These were originally designed to hide pox scars, but over time they became fashionable in their own right. A star on the cheek, a crescent near the lip, a single dot by the eye. Each patch carried meaning. A patch near the mouth, flirtatious. One near the eye, melancholic. One on the chin, bold. You choose a tiny leaf shape and place it just to the right of your freckled cheekbone. It says, "I know the rules and how to bend them." There's power in the patch. Subtle rebellion. A way to redirect attention without saying a word. And tonight it works. You look in the mirror and see a vision of elegance, pale skin, gentle blush, no freckles in sight, and a single velvet leaf that says you know exactly what you're doing. You close the powder box with a soft click and exhale. No sun, no shame, just strategy. You've powdered, plucked, and patched. You've turned your freckles into secrets and your eyebrows into elegant whispers. But now at last we arrive at the most treacherous territory in the medieval beauty arsenal, the lips. Ah yes, the lips, those soft little gateways to virtue scandal, or both. You purse yours now, watching them in the mirror, wondering if they look modest alluring, or accidentally purple, in an era where too much lip colour might provoke a sermon, and too little might suggest anemia. You tread a fine line, like walking a tightrope while holding a basket of beet juice. Lip cosmetics in medieval Europe were surprisingly diverse, though not without controversy. On one hand, a hint of colour suggested vitality, youth, and good health. On the other, it was also associated with actresses, witches, and women who read poetry too enthusiastically. You begin as always with a base beeswax, gently warmed and spread across your lips to smooth cracks and create a soft surface. It smells faintly of honey, and old candles comforting, if a little sticky. Next comes the tint. Today you're feeling conservative, so you choose a stain made from boiled beetroot and alkanet root, a mix that offers a gentle red hue, not too bold, not too bashful. You apply it using a small brush made from stiff pig hairs. It goes on unevenly at first, but then settles into a velvety sheen. The effect is pleasing, not too bright, a bit like you've just bitten into a very restrained pomegranate. Historians still argue whether coloured lips were accepted at court or merely tolerated. Some records suggest noble women wore lip stains openly, especially during feasts and festivals. Others describe them sneaking applications behind chamber doors, blotting hurriedly with sleeves, if a cleric entered the room too quickly. There's even a letter from a Venetian merchant's wife complaining that her sister-in-law dyes her lips redder than St. Sebastian's wounds. A harsh simile, but we get the picture. Lip stain was controversial. The most common colourant, madder. Root, a vivid crimson plant used in everything, from fabrics to face paint. It stained beautifully, but tasted terrible. To fix this, some women mixed it with honey or rose water. Others just endured the bitterness, figuring beauty and suffering were old dance partners anyway. You've opted for beet and honey, far more pleasant than madder. But if you wanted a more intense stain, you could use cochineal, those precious crimson insects again, or even red ochre, a mineral pigment ground fine and mixed with oil. Dangerous possibly, but striking. Once your stain is applied, you gently blot your lips with the back of your hand. The colour stays. A soft bloom, like pressed rose petals, or the blush on an apple left too long in the sun. But lips were more than just pretty, they were interpreted. A woman's mouth was a landscape of meaning in medieval texts. Full lips suggested sensuality, but also danger. Thin lips meant intellect or stinginess. Pale lips, piety. Red lips, possibly seduction. Or poison, or both. One popular courtly handbook even warns men not to fall in love with a woman whose lips glisten with colour, for she has already kissed temptation. This might explain why some women left the centre of their lips pale and only stained the edges, an optical illusion of modesty. Very clever. Still, in spite of warnings, lip colour remained quietly in vogue, especially among the fashionable elite. In France, during certain reigns, it became almost expected for court ladies to tint their lips and cheeks as part of their daily ensemble. A pale mouth, one poet wrote, is a door that does not wish to be opened. Saucy. Of course, not all stains were natural. Some used lead-based rouges, which tingled at first and burned if over-applied. Others used iron oxide, a reddish dust gathered from mineral deposits mixed with water and wine. It worked, but it could also stain your teeth, a deal-breaker, in a society already suspicious of bold women. Speaking of teeth, you take a moment to inspect yours. Cleanliness mattered even if tooth care was rudimentary. You chew a bit of fennel seed to freshen your breath and polish with a twig of hazelwood. A little scrape, a little prayer, done. Now to finish the lips a gloss. This comes from goose grease, mixed with crushed rose petals, and stored in a tiny lidded pot. It smells faintly of poultry and perfume, a curious blend, but surprisingly effective. You dab it lightly over your stain, giving the lips a soft shine. The kind that catches firelight and holds it like a secret. The final effect is understated, but intentional. Your lips look touched, not painted. Lived in, not schemed. You practice a few expressions, a demure smile, a curious pout, a slow exhale, all convincing, all carefully within the boundaries of courtly behaviour. But here's the twist. Lip colour wasn't just for the living. There are records of funerary cosmetics, gentle rouges applied to the lips and cheeks of noble women before burial. The goal? To preserve their image of beauty for eternity, to ensure they look serene, devout, and a little flushed, as though they might wake up and offer a prayer or a witty comment about the bishop's shoes. You're not dead, but your look tonight could fool an angel. And if anyone comments on the gentle flush of your mouth, you'll simply smile and say, "It's the wine," even though you've only sipped broth all day, because your lips don't speak truth. They speak style. The hour grows late, and the fire in your chamber has dimmed to glowing embers. You've survived the scrapes of tweezers, the stings of vinegar, the vague moral peril of lip rouge, and now at last your beauty routine begins to slow. It is night, time for rest. But make no mistake, even in sleep, the medieval noblewoman does not surrender her elegance. Welcome to the bedtime portion of your skincare routine, circa 1374. Not quite a spa, not quite a battlefield, but somewhere in between. You begin by peeling away the day's architecture, the veil, the pins, the layers of powder and pearl. Your maid assists as always, starting with the loosening of your linen cap. Beneath it, your hair is slightly damp, with the perfume sachets you tucked in earlier now warmed by your body and sweetened by the hours. She brushes it gently, not to style it, but to ensure no residue remains. 100 strokes slow, and even using a brush made from hog bristles bound into polished wood. Next comes the cleansing. You kneel beside the small ceramic basin, glaze cracked in one corner, and splash your face with a mixture of rainwater, cooled chamomile tea, and goat's milk. This concoction is believed to soften the skin and calm the fire of the day according to your mother's household manual. It smells faintly of hay and bedtime prayers. Then comes the cloth, a narrow strip of bleached linen soaked in rose oil and wrapped gently across your forehead. It holds the skin smooth overnight, a kind of primitive wrinkle band. You'll wear it until morning, assuming it doesn't slide off and frighten your maid into thinking you've joined the ranks of the dearly departed. Next you prepare the night mask, not a fabric one, but a soft paste made from honey barley flour and a dab of rendered goose fat. This is gently smeared across the cheeks, nose and chin, massaged with the fingers, until your face feels heavy and slightly tacky. In theory, this will draw out poison humours and restore balance. In practice, it leaves your skin smelling like a bakery opened in a barn. Still, it works. Tomorrow, your cheeks will feel like velvet. To avoid staining the sheets, you tie a second cloth around your jaw, another strip of linen, this one thinner, secured behind the ears like a sling. The medieval version of a compression wrap. A bit absurd, yes, but also oddly comforting. And now the eyes. You dip 2 small pieces of cloth into eyebright tea wrung out until just damp. These are pressed over your closed lids. Not only does this help reduce puffiness, though no one calls it that, yet it also wards off night demons who apparently love dry eyes. You lie still for 5 minutes, listening to the sounds of the household settling, a creak of timber, a distant cough, the soft rustle of a servant finishing her prayers. The cloths cool, then warm, then are folded away. Some women, those with time and privacy, also massage their temples with goose grease and sage oil to relax the brow and encourage prophetic dreams. Whether this works is uncertain, but your aunt swore by it, and her dreams once predicted a sheep falling through the kitchen roof. That has to count for something. Next comes the neck salve. This is made of mashed figs and alum spread just beneath the chin to prevent sagging. It tingles slightly, not unpleasantly. You pat it into place with the back of a silver spoon and hope no one calls for you in the next hour. You'd hate to have to explain why your throat smells like a dessert gone wrong. Then oddest of all, the lip shield. Remember your soft honey-tinted lips from earlier? You must preserve them. To do this, you take a small piece of parchment, waxed and infused with mint oil, and gently press it over your mouth. It keeps the moisture in, prevents chapping, and as a bonus, silences nighttime mumbling should you have secrets to keep. And while some of these practices feel performative, others are deeply personal. There's a tenderness in this nightly ritual, a slow undoing of the day's effort layer by fragrant layer. You remove the facade, but not entirely. You're still curating yourself even in dreams. Not all women followed these routines, of course. Peasant girls use simpler methods, rubbing garlic on blemishes, sleeping with braided hair, to prevent tangles chewing basil to freshen breath. But among the noble class, a good night's beauty was considered preparation for tomorrow's gossip. A 14th century English guidebook even describes a specific dreaming posture for noble women: head, slightly elevated mouth, closed, hands folded near the waist, so that in death or sleep she may always appear composed, relaxing. Not exactly, but consistent with the aesthetic. As you lie back, the linen wraps slightly rustling, you smell faintly of sage rose and honeyed grain. Your face is stiff, your lips are sealed, your forehead is compressed. You are in short, sleeping with intention. And just before you drift off, you whisper the prayer stitched into your bed linens. May my soul remain pure, my skin unblemished, and may no ghost disturb my mask. Your eyes flutter open to soft morning light slanting through the narrow window slits. Somewhere outside, a rooster announces his opinion on dawn, and a cart rumbles over cobblestones. But inside your chamber, the world remains hushed. Your beauty mask, however, has not been so well behaved. The parchment lip shield clings delicately to your cheek, having slipped sideways sometime in the night. The barley honey mask has dried into a delicate crust, faintly golden, and beginning to flake like the surface of a too crisp tart. And your linen forehead strip now rests jauntily around your neck, like a shrugging collar. Still you rise slowly, cautiously, as if you might crack. This is the moment of assessment. You step to the mirror, already preparing your inner monologue. Will your cheek be puffy? Did the salve stain your neck? Did the cloth wrappings leave strange lines across your face, as they sometimes do when tied too tightly? And yet, not bad. In fact, rather lovely. The honey has done its work softening the skin. The goose fat, odd as it may smell, has left a faint glow. Your forehead appears smooth, unlined, as if you've spent the night reading psalms, rather than pinning back your ears with linen like a solemn dumpling. You begin the morning rinse, dipping a soft cloth into water, steeped overnight with marigold petals. This will refresh the skin, remove last night's remnants, and ward off the vapours, which might be caused by anything from bad dreams to cheese. You dab carefully, making sure not to disturb yesterday's invisible work. Now comes a curious step in your routine, a breakfast broth mask. Not consumed, applied. A mixture of warm ale, egg yolk, and thyme patted gently into the skin with a feather. The idea, according to one very confident nun's herbal manual, is that breakfast smells absorbed through the skin will help nourish the spirit. Whether true or not, it does leave you smelling faintly of a cheerful tavern. Next, a dash of rose vinegar rinse across the brow, intended to invigorate the thinking centre. It tingles in a way that makes your scalp prickle and your left eye twitch, which must mean it's working. Your maid hums softly while folding the linens you shed. She doesn't comment on the honey stuck to your ear. She's seen worse. Now begins the ceremonial reveil. Today it's a soft linen number, dyed with woad, giving it a slight bluish hue, a colour favoured by both the Virgin Mary and women who want to appear pious while still standing out at lunch. You pin it into place over your freshly brushed hair, which has been lightly oiled with elderflower, and twisted into 2 braids pinned at the nape of the neck. Braids are practical. They prevent knots, reduce breakage, and most importantly, don't require touch-ups throughout the day. You don't have mirrors everywhere after all. If your veil slips slightly, and someone catches a glimpse of your real hair better, they see tidy plaits than chaos. But today isn't just about maintenance, it's about presentation. You'll be seen, and that means every detail counts. You reapply a small amount of burnt almond cream to even your skin tone using soft strokes and short dabs. Just enough to say I've been awake since dawn because I'm virtuous, not I've fought with a goose over my laundry. Then comes a faint trace of saffron milk, giving your cheeks a gentle glow. You skip the beetroot stain today, too informal. For the lips, you rehydrate them with a dab of rosemary balm, less sticky than the goose fat version, and better suited for daytime conversation. Your breath. Already mint fresh, thanks to the sprig you nibbled discreetly while dressing. A trick your aunt taught you, better to chew in silence than speak in stink. And finally a tiny dusting of orris root powder carried in a velvet pouch and applied with the corner of your veil. It smells faintly of violets and helps control the natural oiliness of your skin, which your body continues to produce in spite of all your hard work. The nerve. Now fully adorned, you make your way to the solar, where others are beginning to gather. They look well, like people who didn't sleep in a goose-fat mask, that's for sure. You float among them, serene, barely touching the wooden benches as you settle into place. One lady compliments your skin. You murmur something about chamomile. Another gestures to your veil. New, she asks. You smile modestly. Let them wonder. Let them write letters later, asking their cousins for the fig and alum throat poultice recipe. You've earned it. As the morning light glints off your polished jawline, you feel a quiet triumph. All night long you were healing, tightening, smoothing, while others tossed on straw pallets and dreamed unremarkable dreams you were becoming. Even in sleep, your beauty worked. The day drifts onwards, and with it, the weight of your perfected beauty grows heavier, not just metaphorically, but physically. Beneath your many layers of velvet and bone-whitened linen, your skin breathes in silence, held together by powders, oils, and faintly medicinal glue. But for all your careful efforts, there's still one final indulgence awaiting you, perhaps the most relaxing, and strangely the most social part of your entire routine. Today you've been invited to a spa gathering. Not the candle and massage sort modern folk dream about, but a medieval version, a steaming, herb-filled chamber tucked behind the ladies' hall with stone benches, cauldrons of mysterious liquids, and women in various stages of damp undress, gossiping over sprigs of mint. You step into the bathing chamber, wrapped in an old wool cloak, and carrying a pouch filled with your most treasured ingredients. The air is thick with steam, the scent of thyme, juniper, and rosemary curling around your face like a friendly fog. The walls are warm to the touch, heated by a fire behind them. A luxury, a marvel, a temporary escape. You disrobe discreetly, lowering yourself into a carved stone tub filled with hot water, steeped in marjoram, yarrow, and mint leaves. The heat prickles your skin, first gently, then insistently, until you feel yourself melt, not only from warmth, but from the release of beauty tension. For the first time in days, your forehead loosens. Your cheeks uncoil. Other women join you, chatting softly. One recounts how her niece mistook rouge for jam and spent half the morning pink. Another whispers a new recipe for an underarm paste involving crushed apple and alum. A third, older and very damp, declares with satisfaction that her nightly application of mashed fig has entirely eliminated her chin twitch. The spa day isn't just about treatment, it's about community. Here in the warm hush, women exchange secrets, grievances, remedies, and gentle mockery. They discuss which salves make husbands swoon and which ones repel wandering hands. They debate whether saffron or powdered quartz yields a better sheen under firelight. Someone mentions leeches. A collective groan. You soak. You breathe. You let your pores gasp open in gratitude. After some time, an assistant brings over a small bowl of cucumber water, a recent trend from Lombardy, where it's rumoured the Duchess drinks it with every meal and also bathes her lapdog in it. You sip. It tastes of garden and gossip. Next comes the scrub, a soft cloth dipped in honeyed oat paste, rubbed gently over your arms, neck and shoulders. It's not exfoliation as we know it, but it sloughs off the outermost layer of skin and possibly several minor regrets. You feel light, translucent, ready for sainthood, or at least another portrait. Then the masking begins. Not the night masks of goose fat and fig, these are spa masks designed to be worn communally while lounging against damp tile. Yours is a blend of clay rosewater and crushed fennel seed smeared generously over the cheeks and left to dry in delicate flakes. Another woman has chosen a mixture involving egg yolk and milk curd, while her companion has gone full daring and used melted beeswax, which she fans with a piece of parchment to avoid drips. You sit in silence, the chamber, warm your body, buoyant, your face tight in the best way. Occasionally someone breaks the quiet with a soft laugh or a sigh. Time is slower here, less linear, like the pages of an old book open to a comfortable chapter. Eventually attendants return with steaming towels and fresh linen wraps. Your mask is removed with care. Your skin feels impossibly smooth, ridiculous even. You almost miss the weight of your veil. Almost. You dry slowly, allowing the steam to evaporate from your skin. Then a final indulgence, a light anointing with lavender oil and almond cream rubbed into the arms and chest, just enough to leave a glow, not a glisten. The line, as always, is fine. You dress once more, slipping into your second best gown, a sign of respect to your fellow spa-goers, without overstepping. The moment you pin your veil back into place, you are once again the picture of composed nobility. But beneath it, your skin tingles with softness, and your mind for once feels quiet. You leave the spa chamber slowly, feet bare against the warm stone. The late afternoon light filters through the high windows in golden beams, dust dancing in the hush. You've made it. Your beauty has been built, dismantled, rebuilt again. You've powdered and peeled, steeped and smoothed. You've trusted herb's heat and sheer will. And somehow you've emerged softer, stranger, more radiant than before. There is one final ritual, a silent pause at the mirror. You glance only briefly, then lower your eyes. Not out of modesty, but because you already know what's there. Glow, stillness, and the faint scent of fennel. And now with your face washed and wrapped, your limbs soft from steam and lavender, and your skin holding the memory of honey and stone, you lie in bed once again. The chamber is dark now, just the faint crackle of embers and the creak of timber in the walls. You lie still, linen sheet tucked gently under your chin, hair braided loosely across your pillow. You don't move. You don't need to. You've done all that was required, every step of it, absurd and soothing, and strangely lovely. You breathe in deeply, the scent of elderflower and ash. You exhale slowly, Nothing hurts. Nothing needs fixing. Your jaw softens. Your fingers uncurl. Outside, the wind presses gently against the shutters, not with urgency, but with rhythm. Like breath, like waves. And somewhere far away, another woman rises to steep marigolds, to boil barley to smear another version of beauty across another face shaped by custom and hope. But not you, not tonight. Tonight you rest. You are unwrinkled, unlaughed, untouched by time or sun. You are a quiet portrait in the softest of frames. Let your thoughts drift slow and loose like satin caught in water. Let your mind soften where the light fades. You are beautiful, you are still, and everything else can wait for morning. Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into a city that doesn't sleep, because it's either too noisy, too hungry, or too busy smelling like half a bakery and half a battlefield. You're waking up in 18th century Paris sometime around 1769, and the scent in the air isn't just morning dew and croissants. It's roasted wheat, coal smoke, stale urine, and the faint but unmistakable tang of gunpowder from a military warehouse just a few streets away. You're wrapped in a rough linen sheet, curled on a straw mattress, in a shared garret above the Rue Mouffetard. Below you, shutters bang gently in the breeze, and pigeons coo with a kind of sleepy entitlement from the rooftop. The city stirs unevenly, but with intention. You shuffle downstairs, careful not to step on the cat. Someone's already emptied the chamber pot out the rear window, hopefully not onto anyone's laundry, and the familiar morning mist of Parisian street funk greets your nostrils. It's not terrible, per se, but it's layered. The Rue Mouffetard, ancient even in the 1700s, is narrow, irregular, and always slightly damp. You step into it boots soft against the slick cobblestones and inhale deeply. First, the unmistakable whiff of fresh bread from Madame Giraud's bakery 2 doors down. Then smoke-charred wood and coal mingling overhead from the chimney of the blacksmith. Finally, something metallic, something sharp, that trace of gunpowder, like someone's lit a firecracker behind your ear. Historians still argue whether the powder scent was from actual military stockpiles or just the byproduct of chemical trades nearby. But there's no doubt it clung to the neighbourhood. As you walk further down the slope, the bakery smells strengthened, warm, dense, and almost sweet. Paris in the 8th century runs on breads. You can't escape it. It's the cornerstone of every meal, every riot, and every nervous muttering about taxes. There's even a saying, better a loaf than a crown, which makes slightly less sense when you're hungry. You pass men hauling sacks of flour on their backs, white dust trailing behind them like ghostly fog. There's a rhythm to it all, the clatter of hooves, the low murmur of bakers kneading the hiss of dough hitting hot brick. The scent of rising yeast mixes with wood ash, and oddly the faintest note of vinegar from a nearby pickler's shop. Paris smells alive. Not just in the poetic sense, but biologically. Things are fermenting, rising, rotting, combusting, all at once. Even now, as you pass the communal fountain, where a small crowd has already gathered with pails, you catch the scent of wet stone and lye soap. A washerwoman scrubs linen furiously, and behind her someone argues about a late bread delivery. This isn't a quiet morning, but it's consistent. And beneath it all, beneath the everyday warmth of baking crusts and wet cobbles, that nagging whisper of sulphur, the city's secret weapon. Gunpowder isn't just stored in the outskirts, it's right here buried below, mixed into the economic bloodstream. Powder for the army, powder for miners, powder supposedly for fireworks that never get used. There's a military depot 2 blocks over, and while it's well guarded, the smell leaks out. Like a rumour. Sharp, dry, and just a little arrogant. As you move toward the market square, your nose learns to sort by purpose. That sharp, briny scent salted fish laid out on the stone slabs before sunrise, the musky, peppery haze floating from an open window, someone cooking onions and garlic in bacon grease, and that crisp, clean waft of crushed mint, a surgeon's apprentice boiling his tools in hope, if not science. One of the oddities of pre-revolution Paris is how accustomed people are to the contrasts. The same street that smells like baking brioche might also carry the edge of black powder and stale sweat. And somehow it works. The bread distracts. The powder prepares. You grow used to it. You cross under a stone archway where ivy grows in defiance of smoke, and for a moment the scent changes entirely floral, almost gentle. A trick of the wind. Or someone's forgotten perfume bottle smashed on the steps. Then back to the mix, yeast, fire, iron, and earth. Someone behind you is coughing. Not dramatically. Just the standard polite city cough of someone who's inhaled a little too much soot for one morning. It's almost musical. You reach for a fig from a vendor's cart and bite into it. Sweet. Overripe. And now you're part of the city's flavour too. You wander a little farther up the Rue Mouffetards, the air warming as the sun climbs above crooked rooftops and chimney stacks. It's not even mid-morning, and yet the scent of bread is everywhere. Not just floating from open bakery doors, but clinging to the walls, whispering from the cobblestones, practically baked into the stones themselves. Paris doesn't just eat bread, it breathes it. By the 18th century, this city is a living oven. Its neighbourhoods, strung together by boulangers, whose lives revolve around fermentation firewood, and that perfect crust. You can't go more than a few blocks without smelling another variation of it. Light and airy pain de campagne in the Latin Quarter. Dense rye near the Seine, and sourdough boule in the Jewish district that smells like it's hiding secrets. And unlike today bread, in 1760s Paris isn't just one category on a cafe menu. It's the menu. Rich or poor, peasant or prince, you are, on some level, a creature of the loaf. Historians still argue whether the average Parisian ate 1 pound or 2 pounds of bread per day, but everyone agrees on one thing: if bread stops, Paris breaks. The scent wafting from bakeries in this era isn't just cosy, it's crucial. It tells the neighbours the dough has risen. It tells city inspectors the oven's lit. It tells the women in line outside how close they are to taking something home. And if it's missing, if you walk past a boulangerie and smell nothing but cold brick and ash, well, that's when people start to murmur. Bread is political. Bread is predictive. You duck into a narrow side street, Rue de la Tombe Issoire, where a baker's apprentice is hauling sacks of wheat flour up a stairwell. A puff of powder bursts from the bag and hangs in the air like fog. It smells sharp, raw, dry. And behind it, from inside the shop, comes a different scent, entirely fermentation, that almost boozy tang that means dough is resting, breathing. A wood-fired oven hums against the far wall. Inside, loaves sizzle as they crisp, sending tendrils of steam curling through cracks in the door. The apprentice smiles at you, flour in his eyebrows, arms smudged with soot and dough. This is not glamorous work, but it is sacred. You pause at the doorway. The smells layer themselves like a strange edible hymn. First a bass note of charred wheat, crispy edges that sing of flame. Then a high note of wild yeast, tangy expectant. Finally, the comforting middle warm starch, almost sweet, the kind of scent that makes your stomach rumble even when you're full. You don't go inside, you just stand and breathe it in along with the other figures lingering nearby. No one's speaking, everyone's just inhaling, slowly, like the scent itself is a kind of promise. You continue walking, turning down Rue de Bièvre, where several family-run bakeries have claimed space for generations. A few storefronts have plaques, discreet and faded, marking centuries of dough. One even boasts that it baked loaves for Louis XV's cousin. Whether this is true or merely optimistic branding, no one knows. But it smells good enough to be royal. Every neighbourhood in Paris seems to have its own bread identity. Some favour thin crusts, others soft interiors. And the flour. It varies too. Barley in lean times. Chestnut flour in poorer districts. Mixed grains during wartime. Historians still debate the exact ratio of grain blends used per arrondissement, but everyone agrees the smell told the story. There's even a theory that Parisians could tell time by a bread scent. That if you lived on Rue Saint-Honoré, the rise and fall of different bakery aromas from starter to steam could map out your day like a clock. Yeast at dawn, crust by noon, ash and damp flour by twilight. You reach a small plaza where 3 streets meet, and in the centre sits a round, communal oven. Not decorative, functional. Built for when individual ovens weren't practical or permitted. Women bring trays of dough from home, marked with little cuts to identify whose is whose. The oven steward, a large man with hands like roasted chestnuts, gently guides the trays into the fire brick maw. He smells like every breakfast you've ever wanted. Children play near the plaza fountain, and every so often a young boy reaches up to steal a scrap of cooling crust from a tray. No one stops him. He's part of the choreography. A gust of wind shifts the scents again. You catch the faint burn of ash, then the earthy funk of damp flour sacks, and just beyond that someone cooking lentils. But it's the bread that wins again and again. It's the scent that drapes itself over the city like a warm blanket. And then just as you're rounding the plaza's edge, you notice something else. A faint edge, a dryness, sharp, metallic, almost like fireworks after rain. Gunpowder. It's there faint but certain beneath the steam and yeast. Another layer in this great olfactory lasagna of 18th century Paris. You ignore it for now, letting the bread lull you into a haze. But it waits, below, behind, beneath, like a warning wrapped in crust. The scent follows you even as you walk away from the warm sanctuary of the bakery plaza. But now it shifts soft yeast and wood smoke giving way to something drier, harsher. As your boots tap along the cobbled stretch of Rue de l'Arbalète, the bread disappears behind you, and the scent of something sharper takes its place. Gunpowder. Not an explosion. Not smoke. Just the quiet, unnerving signature of saltpeter and charcoal and sulphur wound together like a promise. It's a smell that doesn't raise alarm anymore. It simply exists part of the tapestry of urban life. You grow used to it the same way you've grown used to the faint tang of soap lye in bathhouse alleys, or the waft of raw fish near the Seine. Paris in the 18th century keeps its secrets beneath its feet, and you're walking directly over one of them. Unbeknownst to most people walking these same streets, toting sacks of flour, chasing chickens, balancing firewood, there's a world below an underground labyrinth of storage tunnels, catacombs, and vaulted military depots. Some of them store bones, others bread rations, and a select few black powder. The arsenal, the old military district, just southeast of the Bastille, acts as the city's quiet powder keg. Officially, it's a storage site, but unofficially, it's a quiet shadow stitched under the city, and the scent leaks up through the stones like a slow exhale. Historians still argue whether this particular block of the left bank had an official powder cellar. Records are vague, and maps of that time were often more decorative than useful. But the oral histories, the whispered warnings not to light a pipe near certain alley grates, suggest something was definitely brewing below. You pass a pair of municipal workers sweeping ash from a carriage rut. One of them spits and mutters about the burning brick stink that lingers at night. The other just nods. He knows, you know, everyone knows. Beneath Paris lies not only the dead, but the dangerous. You stop beside a cast iron grate, slightly crooked, half covered in moss. Air rises from it, in a lazy curl, warmer than the street around it. You bend closer. There it is again, that strange mixture of heat and salt and spark. Like a fire that hasn't quite started. It's subtle. You wouldn't notice it if you hadn't just walked through 4 different bakery districts, if your nose hadn't been trained to distinguish charred crust from sulphur smoke. But now you can't not smell it. And it's not just here. Powder factories dot the outer arrondissements. Their work feeds the city's arsenals and artillery stores. They mill saltpeter ground in pestles soaked in urine, dried in clay, and mix it with charcoal and sulphur to create the lifeblood of musket fire and mortar shells. And where does much of that powder go directly under your feet? You continue walking toward Rue Saint-Antoine, where the scent sharpens again, thinner, almost clinical. It's not the rough, homemade gunpowder of an amateur cellar. This is refined, stored, packed, waiting. You pass a building marked only with a faded royal fleur-de-lis and barred windows. No signage, no shop front, just heavy shutters and a door that's always closed. But the air around it hums. A local child once told you this building sings to dogs, meaning animals bark when they pass it. Whether from noise, scent, or instinct, no one can say. But the building holds its breath, and so do you. Farther down, a man sells bread rolls from a handcart. The scent is familiar, comforting, but now laced with paranoia. What would happen, you wonder, if the oven fires of Paris flickered too close to one of these cellars? If a dropped lantern, or a pipe spark, found its way through a crack? That's the thing. Paris isn't just a city of scent, it's a city of friction. And in the 18th century, the line between comfort and catastrophe smells a lot like warm bread and slow-burning powder. You pass a corner where a woman hangs her laundry. The breeze kicks up her sheet, revealing the moss-dark wall of a powderworks building. She doesn't look at it. No one really does. It's there. That's enough. Historians debate just how aware the public truly was of how much powder lay beneath their feet. Some believe the government kept it quiet. Others argue that the daily scent of sulphur and charcoal would have made denial impossible. Either way, it shaped the way people moved, lit fires, built ovens. Caution baked into routine. And the funny thing, the city needs this powder. For the army, the police, the garrison at the Bastille. Even fireworks, those rare, explosive displays of royal whimsy, depend on it. You finally reach the edge of a small park, more a clearing than a proper garden where the wind shifts again. The powder scent fades. Bread returns. A woman nearby is cooking something doughy over an open flame. The smell is clean, familiar, but still under it all, there's the faintest echo of that metallic scent. A reminder that beneath the city's crusty exterior is a world ready to ignite. You sit on a bench carved from old timber, warmed by the morning sun. Around you, Paris bustles like always, hooves on stone pots, banging someone yelling about onions, and below you, still, waiting. You sit on the worn bench for a little while longer, letting the morning swirl past in loops of smoked dough and chatter. It's peaceful in that busy kind of way. A chicken clucks indignantly near a cart. A child shrieks at pigeons that do not care. But the city's scent, its language of smells, never stops. And now, as the sun rises higher and begins to warm the stones underfoot, you're hit with one of Paris's oldest and most loyal companions, the smell of waste. Not the kind you might politely sidestep in a farm village, but the grand rolling stench of a city built before the concept of plumbing. Paris in the 18th century does not flush, it flings. Someone just emptied a chamber pot out a second-story window. You don't see it happen, but the timing is right. You feel it like a warning in the air, followed by the unmistakable sound of liquid hitting stone. You make a mental note never to walk too close to walls in the morning. There is a method to it, of course. A practiced rhythm. Households are supposed to shout, "Guard low, watch out for the water," before sending their contributions down into the gutters. Whether they do or not is another matter. Some whisper it, some shout it too late, some don't bother at all. Historians still argue whether this urban choreography actually reduced the spread of disease, or merely turned dodging human waste into an informal city sport. What they do agree on is that scent was unavoidable, and strangely comforting in its predictability. You get up and keep walking, weaving through the alleys near the river Bièvre, once famed for its clean water, but now mostly a murky, fish-scented thread lined with the working class. This part of town has its own fragrance, soap tanneries, and fermented wool. A laundry line stretches across your path, dripping water that smells faintly of lye and lavender. Someone's washing linens with handmade soap, probably boiled from animal fat ashes, and a heavy-handed pour of herbs. You pass beneath the line, careful not to let it slap your hat, and the scent hits you fully pungent, sharp, but oddly clean. It cuts through the gunpowder, through the bread, through the background grime. It's aggressive but deliberate. A clean made of desperation and effort. That's the rhythm of Paris one smell trying to overpower another. Waste counters bread, lye counters waste, vinegar counters lye. And through it all, the wind decides who wins. Today's wind is indecisive. It loops back carrying scents like secrets from one district to the next. You pass a corner where a butcher is hosing down his stoop. The water-stained faint pink flows into a drain where it mingles with something suspiciously yellow. The two liquids swirl together briefly, creating a marbled illusion of art before disappearing under the city. You try not to imagine where it's headed. Somewhere beneath your favourite bakery, probably. Just ahead, a woman leans from a windowsill, scrubbing a wooden bucket with vinegar and salt. She pours the grey water down a grate and wrinkles her nose, not from the smell, but from the splashback. You give her a small nod. She nods back. This is the Parisian version of neighbourly solidarity, mutual acknowledgement of the city's very wet, very aromatic habits. Now the scent shifts again. You've reached a bathhouse district marked by tall, narrow buildings and little signs shaped like ewers or steam plumes. They're not spas. Not exactly. More like warm rooms with buckets. But they carry a distinct scent, boiled herbs, wet tile, and stale steam. A man opens the door to one as you pass, and the wave of warmth and time-sweat air hits you like a soft punch. Some of these bathhouses double as public laundries, where women beat garments against wooden boards and mutter about soap prices. You peek into one window, rows of shirts hanging like defeated ghosts, steam curling like incense, the soft sound of voices echoing in damp brick corridors. And even here, within this network of cleaning the smell of waste, lingers. It never fully leaves. It settles into cracks, creeps into ceilings. You learn to live with it, to walk faster when it intensifies, to breathe shallowly near drainpipes. In aristocratic neighbourhoods, they try to mask the scent rather than remove it. You stroll up toward the Marais, where the streets widen slightly and the buildings wear powdered stone like makeup. Here perfume battles reality. Bouquets of orange blossom and musk hang in the air around doorways. Someone's tossed potpourri onto the steps. A lady passes with a pomander ball hanging from her waist, an orb of cloves, nutmeg, and rose petals wrapped in gilded mesh. But even here, even under all the lavender, the city's core scent still peeks through, like perfume on a coat that's been hanging next to onions. Elegant but compromised. You pause beside a fountain where a dog is sniffing intently at the base. A child tries to shoo it away, but the dog resists. There's something there, something deep in the stone that has captured its attention. Probably hundreds of years' worth of spills, waste soap, and secrets. You breathe in again, because what else can you do? The smell is terrible, but it's also honest. Paris, you realise, is a city that's always recovering from itself. Each scent is a bandage over something older. And no matter how many flowers you sprinkle or herbs you boil, the past still lingers in the air, quietly steaming in the sun. You turn a corner off the Rue des Fossés Saint-Bernard and find yourself in a neighbourhood where two very distinct worlds live side by side, the bread makers and the barracks. It's not immediately obvious, but you can smell it. One side of the street smells like fresh baguette and warm ash. The other side smells like oil wool and something distinctly military, a kind of brassy boot polish scent, with an undertone of worn leather and armpit defiance. This is the strange and rarely discussed overlap between bakers and soldiers, a coexistence that flourished under the surface of 18th century Paris. And of course it was mostly about firewood. In a city where bread is religion, fire is sacred. And in a city that's always on the verge of either celebration or revolt, soldiers need their gear dry and their soup hot. You'd think this would cause conflict, but it turns out they had a lot to trade, mostly in logs, warmth and complaints. You pass a stone-walled courtyard behind a garrison where 3 men in uniform are chopping wood, not for musket stocks or wagon wheels, but for a bakery oven located just next door. The baker, wearing a soot-smeared apron and absolutely no sense of urgency, leans on the doorframe and nods approvingly. That firewood was delivered by the army in exchange for something that smells remarkably like a military-sized tart. Historians still argue whether such arrangements were official or quietly improvised. There's no regulation that says soldiers should fuel bakers' ovens, or that bakers should supply rations to platoons in exchange. And yet it happened often, especially when temperatures dropped or revolutions crept in from the east. The air around you is thick with roasted grain, but now laced with gun oil and wool sweat. You pass a soldier airing out a leather bandolier, his boots resting on a crate of flour. Behind him, someone's boiling something in a large pot over an open fire. The scent is halfway between soup and shoe polish. A baker's apprentice jogs past, carrying a wooden tray of round loaves, each marked with a single scored line, a symbol perhaps, or just an easy grip for gloves. He ducks into the military gate and disappears. A moment later you hear laughter, and the soft thud of boots stomping snow, or ash from soles. There's an unspoken rule here: bakers don't ask questions about what's stored next door, and soldiers don't criticise how early the ovens light. Because the truth is, they need each other. Bread has to get to the barracks before dawn. The barracks provide heat protection, and occasionally a second pair of hands when a bakery delivery cart loses a wheel. And let's not forget the midnight favours. Many bakers work through the night, and soldiers on night watch often patrol near those warm, flower-scented windows. A leftover crust here, a mug of watered wine there. It's not bribery, it's community. You keep walking and pass a modest tavern marked only by a wooden spoon nailed above the door. The scent wafting out is distinctly hybrid baked onion, tarts, sour bread, pudding, and what might generously be described as burnt sausage optimism. Inside, soldiers off-duty crowd shoulder to shoulder with flour-dusted tradesmen. A dog sleeps under a table. Someone sings softly off-key but sincere. Outside again, the smell of charcoal smoke grows stronger. A military blacksmith is hammering out horseshoes and musket parts just a few doors down from a patisserie. The contrast is absurd and oddly beautiful. Soot and sugar echoing off the alley walls. You pause near a drainage gutter and notice it's unusually clean, almost scrubbed. That's not an accident. Military order seeps into the sidewalks around here. Where most gutters in Paris carry the scent of rain rot, and last week's regret, this one smells faintly of pine tar and discipline. Further along, you find a low, arched door with a rusted hinge. Peeking inside, you see it leads to a shared storage cellar, 1 part flour, 1 part saltpetre, if your nose is right. A dangerous combo perhaps, but well organised. Sacks are stacked by type and size. Brooms hang neatly on pegs. And somewhere in the back you hear the unmistakable whoomp of a powder keg being lowered into place. Above ground the street continues its dance of smells. Someone is toasting rye. Someone is oiling a musket. Someone is sneezing, which releases a puff of what smells suspiciously like pepper, or maybe old wig powder. You spot a cart rolling past filled with what looks like firewood, but you know better. That's oven scrap old bread, too dry to eat, too blessed to waste. It'll be dried further and used for kindling, or crumbled into soup, or fed to pigeons who've lived their entire lives assuming they're also citizens. The Baker Barracks connection runs deeper than logistics. There's a philosophy to it. Both work before the city wakes. Both handle fire daily. Both must produce reliable results under pressure. And both know that a hungry crowd is more dangerous than a foreign army. So they share space, share heat, share silence in the small hours before dawn. And as you round the corner back toward the bakery district you left earlier, the scent of rising dough returns. But this time you can still catch the trace of oil iron and the faint echo of shouted orders riding quietly behind it. The Rue Saint-Antoine stretches ahead a winding ribbon of commotion lined with cafes, wig shops, perfumeries and gossip. You walk slowly now, letting your senses adjust to this new neighbourhood. A place where the smells of baked rye and musket oil begin to give way to something altogether more powdered. Not gunpowder this time, just powder. Face powder, wig powder, soap powder, lavender-scented denial. You're now deep in the territory of the bourgeois and the semi-noble, where every wig is at least slightly ridiculous, and every elbow smells faintly of lilac or lemon. Paris's upper class in the 18th century lives in a cloud not just of privilege, but of perfume and pomade. You pass a storefront trimmed in blue paint and gold leaf. A sign shaped like a curling wig hangs above the door, and inside you glimpse rows of heads, artificial and eerily serene, each topped with a poof of powdered hair. The scent wafting from the open door is unmistakable iris root bergamot, and a trace of stale flour, the base of every respectable hair powder. Historians still argue whether the primary purpose of hair powder was hygiene or just vanity. Wigs weren't washed often, and powder helped absorb oils and odours. Some powders included finely ground starch, others crushed flower petals and herbs. Whatever the recipe, the result was always the same: a soft explosion of scented dust hovering above the head like an opinion no one asked for. You sneeze gently as a breeze carries a little of it your way. Lavender, orris root, possibly the ghost of someone's old wedding corset. The powder is everywhere in this part of the city. It settles on windowsills, drapes over fruit carts, lingers in taverns. And underneath it, always the scent of something trying very hard to stay not Parisian, to rise above the muck and mildew and vinegar of the lower streets. But the city never lets them win entirely, because as you pass a perfumery, its open shutters emitting the scent of rosewater and civet musk, you're suddenly hit with a gust from the opposite direction, the wet, sulphur-laced breath of the sewer. Here's the paradox of elegant 18th century Paris. Its finest perfumes were invented not to impress, but to survive. Everyone stank, that was understood. And those with the money to mask it did so with a kind of theatrical desperation. You pass a man in a finely embroidered coat face, powdered like a frosted cake, who twitches his nose and discreetly pulls a perfumed handkerchief from his pocket. He's not being dramatic. Something has died nearby. Maybe an animal. Maybe just a bad idea. And the wind has decided to bring it back to the party. Another gentleman follows behind him, holding a pomander cane, a walking stick with a hollow silver knob at the top filled with clove and ambergris. He occasionally lifts it to his nose like a monocle made of survival instincts. And the women, they fare no better. You pass a carriage paused at the edge of the square. A lady steps delicately from it, her satin skirts avoiding the puddle beneath her foot by mere inches. As she leans forward, you catch a scent of violet pomade mingled with the faintest suggestion of rancid duck fat. Her hair's volume was achieved with animal grease. There's no hiding it once the sun hits. The deeper you wander into this scented battleground, the more surreal the contrast become. A wig maker sprinkles rose-scented flour onto a towering grey peruke, while across the street, a tanner hoses down animal hides the scent of urine-soaked leather, wafting across the square like a dare. The two seem unaware of each other, or simply beyond caring. You duck into a side alley, Rue des Francs Bourgeois, and the scent shifts again. Here live the vendors who supply the perfume industry, the herb sellers, the starch dealers, the candle makers. One door swings open as you pass, revealing a workshop cluttered with copper stills, drying racks and burlap sacks marked jasmine and charcoal. Inside, an apprentice stirs a pot of civet musk base, wrinkling his nose despite himself. The substance derived from the glands of a small African cat is highly prized for its fixative properties. It also smells initially like unwashed laundry and regret. Only after aging and dilution does it transform into something close to desirable. Historians debate the ethics of such perfumes, whether it was decadence or defence. But here it's clearly survival. Smell or be smelled. You pause at a stall selling scented gloves, a curious Parisian fashion. Gloves perfumed with orange blossom, or cinnamon, meant to keep one's hands delicately aromatic, while deflecting the scent of, say, touching a railing, previously touched by 20 other people, who also hadn't bathed. You slip on a sample pair. They smell like spice cake and powdered sugar. You almost forget this sewer behind you, but only for a moment, because this is Paris, and scent is democracy. No matter how powdered your wig or perfumed your palms, the sulphur in the streets still rises, and the smell of boiled starch and bergamot can only hold out so long against the damp rot of centuries-old drains and the unapologetic presence of humanity. You step back into the main road, wig shops and perfumeries behind you. A breeze carries the scent of bread again, faint but grounding. Somewhere nearby someone's baking. You breathe it in, and layered behind it as always is the faint spark of gunpowder, just enough to keep things interesting. You follow your nose. The bread is behind you, the perfume too. And now ahead something entirely different fills the air, a smell with weight, with presence. You're approaching Les Halles, the belly of Paris, the city's enormous, chaotic, utterly indispensable central market. And the scent, it's like a cannon blast of everything edible and otherwise. Before you even turn the final corner into the square, you know you're close. The air is thicker, moister, full of movement, even when no one's nearby. There's fish, always fish. Salted cod from the coast, eels still wriggling in baskets, oysters packed in straw. The scent is unmistakable, brine scales, seaweed, and something faintly metallic like the edge of a blade. You step into the square, and it hits you full force, cabbage and gun smoke, blood and cinnamon, and yes, even the quiet yeasty calm of dough rising somewhere off to the left. The market doesn't discriminate. It offers all of Paris's scents at once, a bouquet thrown violently in your face. You pass through the vegetable stalls first, where turnips mingle with the damp scent of trampled lettuce. Radishes sliced for samples release a peppery sting into the air. A vendor is roasting chestnuts, and their sweet burnt perfume wafts up like incense from the Church of Commerce. But beneath it always lies the sour undercurrent of the slaughterhouses. Les Halles isn't just fruit and gossip. It's blood-soaked boards bones stacked like firewood steam rising from hot offal in tin basins. You smell it long before you see it. A blend of iron smoke and something almost meaty sweet, like roasted marrow if it had never met dignity. Historians still argue whether the centralisation of meat markets in Les Halles improved public health or merely contained the mess. But there's no denying it created a distinct scent Paris's carnivorous heartbeat. You edge past a row of sausage vendors. One is offering samples of blood sausage boudin noir, and though it's not yet noon, a crowd gathers to taste. You take a slice warm and rich, the scent of spice, and cooked blood coating your tongue and lingering in your nose like a second breath. From somewhere deeper in the market, a musket fires. Not in alarm, just a test from a nearby gunsmith who shares wall space with the tripe seller. His stall reeks of gun oil and aged canvas with just a hint of pepper. You watch a man testing pistols powder, loading with care, while behind him women argue over the price of onions. The contrast is ridiculous. And deeply Parisian. Just a few steps away you encounter the spice vendors, and now the air shifts again. Clove nutmeg, anise paprika and gunpowder residue. That last one is accidental, likely carried in on someone's boots from the artillery barracks, or maybe smuggled in flour sacks by someone with revolutionary aspirations. You sneeze. Twice. A spice merchant laughs and offers you a pinch of dried orange peel. It smells like Christmas and soup, and suddenly you remember half the scents here are not just smells, they're stories, recipes, warnings and memories. And then you pass a stall selling candles, tallow and beeswax side by side. The beeswax smells warm, clean, faintly floral. The tallow. Not so much. More like old meat and regret. These candles go everywhere. Chapels, brothels, city offices, private bedrooms. The scent of burnt animal fat follows Paris wherever light is needed. You duck under a canvas awning, escaping a sudden drizzle, and now you're standing in front of a flower stall. Roses, peonies, marigolds, violets, some drooping, some defiant. They fight valiantly against the scent of wet stone and animal waste. The flower seller spritzes the petals with water, infused with mint and thyme. It doesn't mask the city, but it pushes back. Beside the flowers, someone is roasting coffee. The smell is a revelation, bitter, rich, earthy. It punches through the funk like a cavalry charge. You drift toward it, instinctively drawn by that seductive, slightly burnt perfume. The vendor waves you over. A small cup is pressed into your hand. The coffee is strong, gritty, thick as river mud, but divine. It clears your sinuses. It resets your internal barometer. For a moment, all you smell is the coffee. And then boom, the wind changes. A fresh gust sweeps in from the Rue Montorgueil, carrying the sulphuric smack of musket powder. Somewhere nearby, someone's cart has tipped over. A barrel rolled and cracked. You can't see it, but you know the scent, dry, acrid, immediate, like burnt matches and old thunder. No one panics. Parisians don't. The scent of gunpowder has become just another ingredient in their air like flower dust or perfume. It tells them someone's practicing, or preparing, or planning. You sip your coffee and let it mingle with the sulphur on your tongue. You exhale slowly and smell the layers: bread, blood, musk, spice, coffee, powder, the true Parisian palate. And you realise something else. The city's scent isn't despite the chaos. It is the chaos, blended, baked, bottled, and sold with a smile. You step out of Les Halles, with the buzz of the market still vibrating in your ears, and your nose doing its best to recover. But there's no break for your senses, because the next street over hosts an entirely different but equally pungent set of artisans, the soap makers, the chandlers, and the saltpetre dealers. Rudy Renard curls gently behind the market's edge, and it's quieter here, though, no less fragrant. The first scent that hits you is animal fat, dense and sour, and unmistakably purposeful. You pass a storefront where a man in a leather apron is stirring a vat of what appears to be boiling cream, but smells like lamb trimmings left too long in the sun. This is a soap workshop, though not the kind you'd find in a 21st century boutique. There are no lavender sachets or goat's milk bars tied with twine. Here soap is made from rendered tallow and lye, then cooled in great slabs before being cut, stacked and sold by weight. The result is useful. Cleansing, fragrant only by necessity. You peek inside, the steam is nearly opaque, the floor glistens, and the scent, well, it's like walking into a room full of sweaty aprons, wet ash, and peppermint that gave up halfway through its job. Historians still debate whether the average Parisian used soap regularly or just on feast days and baptisms. But the workshops made enough of it to suggest a culture trying to be clean, even if the process itself reeked of decay. Just a few doors down is a candle maker's shop. The smell sharpens immediately. Beeswax and tallow again in fierce rivalry. You can always tell which one is being processed at any given moment. Today it's tallow. The scent hits hard, greasy, smoky, and faintly like burnt soup bones. Inside the candle maker is dipping long strands of wick into molten fat, over and over, until each builds a uniform layer. The candles are hung from wooden racks that creak gently under the weight. A small dog naps beneath them, nose twitching. In the corner of the shop, a pile of soot-blackened trimmings sits in a barrel steaming gently. They'll be sold later to people who need cheap light or fuel for stoves. Waste not, Paris says, even if it smells like regrets. But it's the next shop that truly stops you. A plain door, no signage, and yet the air outside is distinctly chemical, dry, bitter. You know this scent by now. Saltpetre. Used in gunpowder fertilizer, even some preservation recipes' saltpetre or niter smells like the ghost of ammonia dried in a hayloft. You glance around, then step closer. Inside rows of barrels line the walls, their lids dusted with fine white powder. The shopkeeper eyes you without speaking. You nod politely and back away. One whiff is enough. Saltpetre was once collected from manure heaps, stable floors, and the damp corners of ancient buildings. It's been processed, yes, but some part of your nose still knows where it came from. The scent lingers. It's not just strong, it's insistent like sulphur, with a tax record. And here's where things get strange. In many parts of Paris, these trades overlapped. A soap maker might share a wall with a saltpetre dealer. A candle workshop might purchase lye from a tannery. The entire city functioned like a bizarre, olfactory, interdependent organism, each business feeding the next, in scent, soot, and supply. At the end of the street, a small alley leads to what looks like a storage yard. You peek in and find racks of drying herbs, lavender, thyme, and rue strung like laundry. The herbalist here makes distillations for the perfumeries uptown and antiseptics for the barbers. The scent is a blessed relief after tallow and nitrate. But then someone opens a trapdoor nearby and hauls up a basket of animal hides. And just like that, leather enters the chat. You're reminded that even Paris's nicest smells are constantly being challenged, elbowed aside by something older, more primal, the tannery's offering. A thick, sour smell like wet belts in a hot cellar, carried on a gust of wind that blows your hat nearly off. You regain your composure, tuck your scarf tighter, and keep walking. You pass a pile of charcoal sacks stacked beside a bakery's back door. Their scent is pure and dry smoky, but clean, a rare moment of uncomplicated olfaction. You stop for a moment just to enjoy it. It's the smell of controlled fire, of heat, waiting to be summoned. And then as you near the next bend, you catch it again, that sulphur snap, faint but definite. Saltpeter, again. You've looped back near a different dealer, this one operating from behind a wooden stall. He's weighing bags, licking his thumb to press paper seals closed. A child watches nose wrinkled. The man grins. Smells like revolution, doesn't it? You don't answer. You just nod and keep walking. Because now you understand in Paris, even the clean things smell a little bit like fire. And sometimes they really are. By now, the bread is beginning to fade from the air. Not because it's gone, it never really is, but because something heavier has taken its place, the smell of tension. You wouldn't think tension had a scent, but in Paris circa 1788, it absolutely does. It smells like damp stone, rusted grain bins, and flour dust clinging to sweat. Bread rationing has begun. You step into a square near the Hotel de Ville and immediately feel it in the air, not just on your skin, but in your nostrils. The scent is musty, almost stale, like a cellar that's been locked too long. It doesn't hit you like the bright tang of yeast and steam. It settles slowly like worry. You glance around. The baker's windows are quiet, their displays smaller than usual. A few dry loaves remain hard as bricks and priced like gold. A woman clutches one to her chest like it might be stolen. Another argues with a vendor over yesterday's batch, waving a copper coin that isn't quite enough. Historians still argue whether the bread crisis was purely economic or engineered by factions eager to stir revolt. But for the Parisians on the street, it doesn't matter. When your dinner smells like burnt crust and fear, you stop caring about causes. You walk toward the Rue Montmartre, where one of the larger bakeries used to serve twice daily queues of neighbourhood families. Now there's a line snaking around the block, and it doesn't smell like hope anymore. It smells like wet wool, tired breath, and ration slips clutched in gloved hands. The scent of fresh bread, once a comfort, is now a taunt. A baker steps out, flour streaked across his tunic like war paint. He glances at the crowd and shrugs helplessly. Not till evening, he mutters, voice low. The crowd murmurs back. Some shuffle away. Others stay. One woman fans herself with a bonnet, though the day isn't warm. You edge closer to the alley beside the bakery and catch the sharp scent of flour, not baking, just raw, dry, even a little bitter. Flour that's been sifted and stacked but not yet made into anything. It's stored in sacks like secrets. And just beyond that, mingling like an unwelcome guest, is the scent of ash. Not fresh, cheery fireplace ash. This is burned bread, the kind scraped off a tray with a knife and tossed into the gutter. It smells like missed chances. You remember what an older woman said at Les Halles? When you smell burnt bread, you know someone's watching the door instead of the oven. You suspect there's a deeper meaning there. You move on, crossing paths with two police agents, their uniforms slightly dishevelled, smelling faintly of leather tobacco and disappointment. They don't say much, just nod to the baker's assistant as he passes with an empty sack, probably returning from a failed delivery. But even now, even under rationing, there's a black market. And that has a scent too. You duck down a side street, Rue des Mauvaises Paroles, ironically enough, and find two boys huddled over a satchel. Inside loaves, still warm. Their crusts are pale underbaked, but the smell is unmistakable steam starch and danger. They vanish into a cellar entrance before you can speak. Just a wisp of crust and mischief trailing behind them. There are whispers of bakers hoarding flour, of officials bribed, with loaves of mothers stealing from communal ovens when they think no one's watching. And there's anger always. and it smells like something sour milk iron tools and the inside of a wool glove gripped too tightly. Further down, someone's chalked a message on a bakery wall, pas de pain, pas de paix. No bread, no peace. And right below it, a smear of something that might be dough, or maybe mud, or maybe a warning. You reach the edge of the square, where a small group of women stands, silently, eyes fixed on the door of a boulangerie that hasn't opened in 3 days. One has a basket, one has a stick. You wonder if it's for bread or for breaking. The scent here is different again, sweat, anxiety and dried grain, all warmed slightly by the midday sun. You smell stomachs turning over. You smell fury beginning to simmer. And then oddly, a sudden gust of cinnamon. You turn to see a man sprinting down the street carrying a cloth bundle. He disappears before you can follow the scent, but someone mutters, "Cinnamon cake for the Duke's mistress." No one laughs. Not anymore. Because in a city where the smell of bread used to mean breakfast, now it means inequality, division, and sometimes provocation. You pause beside a lamppost, nose twitching. Somewhere nearby, someone's cooking a thin barley gruel. The scent is subtle, earthy, warm, sad. It doesn't fill the air. It hugs it. You close your eyes and breathe slowly. And behind all the worry, the hunger, the politics, there it is again. Gunpowder. Just a whisper. Not enough to name. But enough to remember. Because when the bread runs out, something else always rises. You feel it before you see it. The tension at the bakery doors, thick and sticky like overworked dough. You're in the Faubourg Saint-Antoine now, and here bread riots aren't abstract. They're daily, sometimes hourly. The scent of flour dust and fury hangs in the air like smoke after a kitchen fire. A crowd gathers outside a boulangerie just before dawn. The shop hasn't opened yet, but the line already stretches down the block. Mostly women. Some holding children, all holding something close to weapons, rolling pins, baskets with metal rims, fists. And the scent, it's not bread, it's impatience, coal smoke, and too many unwashed shawls rubbing against each other in close proximity. You step closer. The woman nearest the store has her sleeves rolled. Her face is powdered with flour, not on purpose. She's been here since before sunrise, and the miller's cart kicked up half a sack of it into the air. She smells like a loaf that never got baked. A city official tries to calm the crowd, waving a slip of parchment. More deliveries at noon, he says. The smell of old ink and panic drifts off him. He doesn't believe his own words. Someone throws a clod of dirt. Someone else throws a crust of stale bread. The crowd shifts, surges, but doesn't break. They know how this works. They've done it before, and they'll do it again tomorrow. Historians often describe these bread riots as spontaneous. But to be here is to know the truth they're scheduled. You can smell them coming like rain. When bread doesn't arrive, the temperature of the street rises. You feel it in your lungs. You hear it in the whispers. And yes, you smell it in the sweat, the sour milk, the dry flour, the rising friction between hunger and hope. You edge past the front line and into the side alley beside the bakery. Here the scent is somehow worse. Not because of blood or fire, though those have happened, but because of flour that's trying to be hidden. You find yourself staring at a small shutter, cracked open just enough to let out a curl of steam. Inside, loaves, dozens of them resting on wooden racks. Still warm, still unsliced. Hidden from the mob. You inhale deeply, and what you smell is not just yeast and crust, it's fear. A smell like wet paper and lies. The baker is inside pretending to be out of stock. Whether he's hoarding or simply too afraid to open the doors, you can't say. But the smell has betrayed him. That soft golden scent of newly baked bread is impossible to conceal. It snakes under shutters, around stones over shoulders. The crowd doesn't need proof. They just need noses. A child next to you sniffs. Points. Maman, it begins. The door is kicked. A window cracks. Shouts rise. You step back, not to escape, but to find higher ground, the stone stoop of a cooper's shop. From here, you see it unfold, women pushing forward fists on wood, voices raised. The baker appears at last, wild-eyed, apron streaked with soot. He holds out a single loaf, like an offering to the gods. It isn't enough. The scent of anger swells, but it's joined now by trampled herbs, crushed onions from a toppled cart, and smoke from someone lighting kindling in protest. It's chaos, but it smells like a meal. The riot doesn't last long. It never does. A few loaves are seized, the rest stay inside, but the message lingers curling in the air like ash. We know you have it. You follow the trail of scattered crumbs and damp protest down toward the canal, where women gather to wash clothes and plot their next move. They don't shout here, they murmur. They fold cloth with methodical care, and each motion releases the clean, sharp scent of lye soap into the air. It blends with the smoke and the steam rising off the water. One woman slaps her shirt against a stone and says, "If he'd just opened the door, we wouldn't have bruised it." Another replies, "If he'd opened the door, he wouldn't be sleeping with loaves tonight." They laugh softly. The scent of soap mingles with the scent of wet linen, and for a moment the riot dissolves into routine. But the undercurrent remains. Because bread is not a luxury here. It is a right, a claim, an expectation of the living. And when that expectation is denied, the air itself turns hot. It tightens. It fills with flour before it burns. Bread becomes kindling. Kindling becomes protest. And protest, it smells like toasted crust, and wood smoke, coal, and courage, and something else too. A fuse. You walk away from the canal, the women's voices fading, the scent of lye replaced once more by ash and damp stone. Behind you, a single word echoes through the alleys, demain, tomorrow, and tomorrow smells like trouble. You've walked far from the city's boiling core now, out toward the cultivated hush of Versailles, where the air is supposed to be calmer, sweeter, at least in theory. You expect roses. You expect lemon balm. You expect the practiced scents of royal gardens and perfumed corridors. But instead, the first thing that hits your nose is fertilizer. More specifically, rotting manure-composted fish guts and imported sulfuric compounds. You've arrived at the gardens of Versailles, yes, but not the parts seen on postcards. These are the working gardens, the ones that feed the palace kitchens, and test imported soil additives, where even the king's lettuce is born in stink. You pass rows of melons, their vines, curling like musical notes across dark, damp earth. They smell sweet, at first, almost cloying, but the breeze shifts and brings with it the base notes of rotted blood meal used to enrich the soil. The result is jarring. You smell dessert, then decay. The gardeners wearing smocks that have absorbed 1,000 forgotten leaks move silently among the rows. Their boots squelch. They carry sacks labelled in Latin, some sulphur-rich, some suspiciously pungent. One man sprinkles crushed bone meal, his hands white as a baker's. The air around him smells like anatomy lessons and lilies. Historians still argue whether these aggressive fertilization techniques were modern science or medieval holdovers repackaged as Enlightenment flair. What's certain is that Versailles grew more than roses, and it did so with commitment. You veer toward the orangery, where rows of citrus trees are kept warm in cold seasons. You expect freshness, zest, sunlight, sugar. And for a brief moment, you get it. You pass under an arch and inhale orange blossoms, soil, beeswax from nearby hives. Then comes the potash used to treat fungus. It smells like burnt soap and wet rope. A gardener knocks a crust of white ash from a pot and looks at you as if to say, beauty costs. Even the water used for these plants is scented by accident. The runoff from palace kitchens feeds irrigation. So what waters the thyme might also carry hints of shellfish vinegar and wine dregs. You kneel by a trough and smell it for yourself. It's not unpleasant, just complex, like a broth made from secrets. As you stand, a gust brings something new: gunflint and old canvas. Versailles will has Rahards. Always has. Even in the gardens. Their muskets aren't loaded, not usually, but they're drilled, shined, oiled. The scent of their gear joins the garden air, oddly harmonious with compost and citrus. Citrus and cartridge. Fertilizer and flint. You pause beside a marble statue of Apollo nose lifted. It smells like wet stone, overgrown moss and beeswax. Nearby, a basket of overripe figs has been left out too long. The bees are thrilled, you are less so. You cross into the Queen's Grove, where Marie Antoinette famously played shepherdess in silk. You expect lavender, and perhaps contrived innocence. What you get is the smell of hay rabbits and powdered wigs left too long into the sun. There's a shepherd's hut decorative, but stocked with real cheese and slightly real animals. A goat bleats nearby, and you realise the scent clinging to the air isn't perfume, it's dry straw goat musk and the crust of yesterday's brioche. Somehow the idea of staged rusticity has its own olfactory footprint. You step into the shade of a lilac bush, hoping for floral clarity. Instead, you're met with the faint, undeniable odour of urine-soaked limestone. Likely a corner favoured by tipsy courtiers or unruly footmen. Versailles may glitter, but its foundation is stone and sweat like everywhere else. Still, the flowers do their best. You pass a patch of angelica, its aroma earthy and herbal, like something halfway between celery and dreams. Then violets, small and dusty, their scent delicate but defiant. The breeze carries them upward, trying to outpace the manure. And yet this is part of the palace's charm, the illusion of perfection floating on the scent of decay. Just as you begin to adjust, another gust brings in sulphur sharp and sudden. You turn. A chemist is walking across the gravel path with a wooden box inside sulphur for experiments, possibly fireworks. You don't ask. You've smelled this before. In Paris, in alleys, in powder shops. Even here, even among the lilies and lace, revolution is brewing. You leave the garden slowly, the sun now warm enough to amplify everything. The compost is stronger, the flowers bolder, the bees louder. You pass a group of noble ladies walking arm in arm, laughing too loudly, their perfume thick as icing sugar. One wears heliotrope, so aggressively, it trails behind her like gossip. But beneath it all, beneath the musk, and the manure and the melon skins, one scent remains. The scent of preparation. For beauty. For battle. For something in between. You glance back at the palace. Its golden gates shimmer. Its walls do not smell like royalty. They smell like fertilizer flame and fig leaves. And from the forest beyond the grounds, a cannon test fires. Soft, distant, but unmistakable. The air stirs, and the citrus trees hold their breath. You leave the overripe elegance of Versailles behind, and return to Paris by dusk, when the streets narrow with shadow, and the smoke from cooking fires thickens. But the scent that greets you first isn't dinner, it's gunpowder. This time it's not background noise, it's centre stage. The scent rolls through the city like a warning. Dry sulphurous, with a faint tang of old iron and burned paper. It clings to windowsills, seeps through the cracks in shutters, and settles over the rooftops like ash from an invisible fire. It's July 1718, and the city is no longer just tense. It's simmering. As you walk along the Rue du Temple, you see groups of men gathered on corners. Not laughing, not chatting, whispering, practicing, loading. One sharp turn of the breeze, and you're hit with it, full force the musk of old wool uniforms oil from gun parts, and the unmistakable edge of saltpetre. Mixed with it is something sweeter bread, yes, but now it smells defensive, like someone made it with one eye on the oven and one on the window. You follow the scent trail toward a courtyard behind a cooper's shop. A door swings open just long enough for you to catch a glimpse, barrels filled not with ale or apples, but bullets. Gunpowder casks. Rags soaked in turpentine. And above all, men who no longer smell like civilians. Historians still argue whether this shift, the city's gradual turn toward armed defiance, was a coordinated movement or an improvisational swell. But from where you stand, it's not theoretical. You can smell it. Across the square, a group of women kneels by a bakery window, tying loaves into cloth bundles. Their faces are unreadable, but the scent, fresh crust rising, steam, and gunpowder dust mixed with flour. It's a recipe Paris knows too well. Feed the people, arm the people, brace for thunder. You turn onto Rue de la Verrerie and pass a closed apothecary with its shutters down and a chalk X drawn on the door. A single candle burns in the window. The scent drifting from the keyhole is odd rosemary vinegar and something metallic, possibly disinfectant, possibly poison, possibly both. Behind you are gun fires. Not an attack, just a test shot, someone checking the fit of their powder load. But the smoke wafts down the alley, thick and acrid. Black powder, hot brass and burnt linen. It burns your throat before it hits your nose. Further down you find a crowd near a small factory, technically a tannery, but now a makeshift munition site. The barrels outside still smell like animal hide and alum, but there's something new here, boiling water melting wax, the carbon stink of lead musket balls cooling in sand. The men working here aren't soldiers. They're butchers, bakers, hatters. But the scent of them now is martial sweat soot and confidence. You crouch behind a water trough to avoid being seen. From here, the air is laced with damp straw and the blackened sweetness of burning sugar, likely used to mask the sharper smells of nitrate. One man lights a pipe, and immediately 4 others yell, "Fire and powder do not mix." The pipe is extinguished, and the scent of tobacco disappears into the dominant musk of readiness. In the distance, bells begin to ring, not church bells, alarm bells. You recognise them not by sound, but by the shift in scent that follows. Suddenly, everything is moving. The sweat of running bodies, the oil from hastily loaded muskets, the acid bite of fear, that most invisible of scents. It rises off the cobblestones, mixes with the scent of hot stone, and the last sunlight slipping across slate roofs. You duck through an archway, momentarily shielded from the crowd. The alley smells of horse urine and moss, familiar grounding. But then the wind returns, and with it a different fragrance, gunpowder cooked into flour. You peer through a side window. Inside, a woman is kneading dough with her sleeves rolled and a musket propped against the hearth. The bread is real, but so is the resolve. You pass another open window and hear whispered prayers. The smell of tallow candles and wood smoke floods out, mingling with the cleaner, sharper scent of fresh flint. All around you, muskets are being readied in milliners' shops, wine cellars behind butchers' blocks. Even the scent of basil from a soup pot doesn't soften the undercurrent anymore. Every smell in Paris is on edge. You cross the Rue du Roi de Sicile and pause. From the far end of the street, smoke rises. The scent hits you even before the shouting begins: gunpowder, sweat baking rye, and singed linen. The revolution hasn't started with speeches. It has started with smell. You follow the scent trail with your whole body now, not just your nose. It pulls you eastward toward the edge of the Faubourg Saint-Antoine, where millstones turn slowly and dangerously, grinding not just grain, but something else. Something coarser. Something that goes boom. Here at the fringe of the city lie the powder mills, mostly disguised as grain mills. To the casual observer, they look like any other riverside industry. Water wheels turning sacks, being lifted, flour dust rising in the air like fog after a rain. But if you know what to smell for, you know better. The scent is tricky. You inhale deeply, and at first it's just wheat, warm and honest like a fresh roll. But then there's a strange dryness, a sharp note, charcoal and bitter lime hiding behind the comforting starch. Not everyone would notice, but you do. You step closer to one of the mills, watching as men haul sacks up a narrow ramp. One of the sacks splits, and greyish powder pours from the tear. Not flour, saltpetre. The worker glances around, grabs a broom, and sweeps it into a barrel marked with a red X. Historians debate how many of these mills doubled as powder factories, and how many simply accidentally allowed their grain processing equipment to be borrowed for revolutionary purposes. What's not up for debate is the smell. Paris may have risen on yeast, but in 1789 it's starting to spin on niter and charcoal. You lean against the stone archway of a grain shed. Inside it smells like warm grain, damp burlap and friction, because every motion here is a balance between speed and not sparking anything. A man walks past, carrying what appears to be a flour sack, but his gloves are thick, and the sack has no flour dust on it, only a fine, dark soot. The smell is unmistakable. Black powder, freshly milled, and it's everywhere, under stairwells, in saddlebags, hidden between sacks of rye and barley. Even in the watermill's gearing system, the faint aroma of oiled metal and nitrate says it loud the city is preparing for something loud. You pass a woman seated on a bench just outside the mill. She's shelling peas, but a musket barrel rests across her lap, polished and gleaming. The scent of gun oil and vegetable water swirls together. She hums softly as if she's just mending socks. Behind her, a boy tossed his kindling into a small oven built against the wall. Someone's baking flatbread, simple fast, no time for rising. The air smells of smoke, hard flour, and powdered fire. You follow the stream bed toward another mill, this one quieter. No wheel turning, but inside, rows of crates line the walls. Each smells different. One carries the sweet tang of rotting wood soaked through with saltpetre. Another the sooty, dense smell of crushed charcoal. And still another the acrid nip of brimstone sulphur pulled from the edges of alchemy. The recipe is old. 3 ingredients: charcoal, sulphur, saltpetre. But what it produces doesn't just smell, it announces itself. Someone drops a bundle of spent rags into a bucket. You catch a whiff of sweat, flour paste and residue from exploded charges. This is the scent of aftermath. Not celebration. Not mourning. Just the plain, acrid smell of something that was once silent and now is not. You hear a grinding wheel turning inside a stone room. A man sits hunched, shaping lead balls with quick, precise hands. The heat from the forge has coated the walls in soot. The room smells like burned gloves and rusted ambition. Back outside, a cart rolls past. Its wooden wheels squeak. Its contents are covered, but the scent leaks out anyway. Sour wine musket grease, old bread and powder rags. You could follow it through the city blindfolded. You watch a woman sharpen a blade on a whetstone, its soft, scraping sound like breathing through teeth. She smells of iron soap and bakery soot, like someone caught between dinner and revolution. A dog barks in the distance, not alarmed, just tired. You walk toward the river, where barges sit tethered their hulls stacked with grain. Or so it seems. One barge, half unloaded, smells suspiciously of raw sulphur with undertones of wet wood and brine. The perfect place to stash something volatile, assuming you didn't mind being remembered as a smoky footnote in a memoir. Even the wind has changed. It used to carry only steam and stew, but now it carries intention. Powder doesn't just sit in boxes anymore, it moves. It's baked into the streets. It hides beneath cauldrons. It waits. A man walks past you trailing a scent that could be church incense or burned rope. You don't ask, you don't follow. Everyone has their part now. You stand on a bridge and look back over the district. The sun is low, shadows stretch long, but the scent rises higher, powder flower metal, and heat all twining together in the air. Paris isn't a city anymore. It's a fuse. Twilight slides in soft at first, then sudden, like a curtain drawn over a boiling pot. You're back in the heart of the city now, and something feels off. Paris is too quiet. But the smells haven't left. If anything, they've sharpened. You're near the Bastille, a hulking shadow of a fortress that smells of mildewed stone, rusted chains and wet soot. The air here doesn't move much. It holds its breath. You feel it in your chest, in your knees. The very ground seems to be listening. You pass vendors packing up early. Cheese, wilted herbs, leftover cabbage stew. None of it sells tonight. The scent that overtakes it all is smoke, not from hearths or ovens, but something brittle and angry. Something burning where it shouldn't. You follow it. Past shuttered inns, past empty cafes, past a shop where the pastries are still in the window but covered in soot. The smell of burned sugar, normally delightful, is now unsettling. It smells like someone knocked over a tray of cookies and then set the tray on fire. And then you hear it, a bang. Not a musket shot, not quite. More like a barrel falling, or someone lighting a fuse that didn't wait. The smoke thickens. The scent of gunpowder, full and unapologetic, grabs your throat. It's not the hint you smelled in alleys or bakeries before. This is the real thing, the aftermath of cartridges fired, barrels, cracked torches, thrown, brimstone, hot linen, scorched leather. You round the corner and see it the storming has begun. A mob surges forward toward the Bastille's gate, voices like a crashing wave. The air is thick with sweat, fear, and charred wood. Someone throws a bottle. It explodes near a lantern, and for a moment the square smells like a forge. You duck beneath an overhang. A man beside you lights a rag and hurls it toward a window. You smell kerosene and cooked cloth. The building flares. Shutters buckle. The smell turns to burned flour sacks and singed hair. You keep moving. The mob pushes forward. Guards shout. Muskets fire. Each shot brings with it a burst of smoke, sulphur and oil and a ghost of iron. The air is choking on it now. You breathe through a damp handkerchief, but it doesn't help. The scent is the air. You recognize it from the mills, the factories, the hidden cellars. But here it's alive. Not stored, not hushed, used. Behind you someone throws a loaf of bread, not as a snack, but as a message. It hits a soldier in the chest and falls in the mud. The soldier doesn't flinch. The loaf sinks into the earth. Steam rises from his musket barrel. The bakery smell is still here, but now it's scorched. Burned crust hot, bricks, blackened grain. Someone's bakery is on fire, or maybe just their cart. A bag of flour bursts open as it falls from a window, coating the air with a cloud so thick it blinds. You cough. The powder mixes with the gun smoke. For one moment, the entire square smells like a baking accident and a battlefield. You stumble into a doorway, half open, and shelter there. The room inside is dark, except for the glow from a lantern in the corner. Someone is boiling water. Not for tea, for cloth. Maybe for wounds. The scent is sharp, antiseptic, vinegar, herbs, salt. A woman kneels beside a boy with a wrapped hand. He smells like ash and sweat and old butter. Probably stole from a bakery before he burned it. Outside, the yelling rises again. Another volley of shots. Gunpowder, blood, urine, adrenaline. It's not clean. It's not noble. But it's real. You push back outside and climb onto a crate for a better view. Smoke obscures most of the Bastille's towers now. You can barely see the flag. But the smell tells you everything: iron melting, wood cracking parchment, burning history, boiling off its skin. And under it all, still bread. Crumbs on the pavement, burned loaves in carts. The last breath of a sourdough starter left unattended in a kitchen that will not survive the night. You close your eyes and inhale, slowly. Roasted grain, charred lace powder. 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 This is the smell of a city breaking itself open. Not for the first time. Not for the last. You step down from the crate and begin walking. Toward the Seine. Toward clean water. Toward quieter air. But even as the river breeze hits your face, the scent lingers behind you. Paris has changed. You know it because it smells different now. Not just louder, not just sharper, but final. You make your way toward the Ile de la Cité as the last hints of sunlight flee the rooftops. The Seine glows dimly, reflecting firelight from the eastern districts and the cool silver of the moon overhead. You lean against the parapet, breathing in slowly, as if the breeze itself could explain what just happened. Paris is quieter now. Not silent, never silent, but stunned. The Bastille has fallen, and the city smells like it. The air around you is ash-heavy, full of the scent of burned banners, damp stone, and overcooked resolve. The familiar scents are still there, redwood smoke, sweat, but they're dimmed, soaked through with the weight of what just unfolded. You close your eyes, inhale, ashes, yeast, and something new. Below the bridges, barges drift with less purpose. A few still carry grain sacks, their scent subtle, just a whisper of milled wheat and damp rope, but even that smells different now. The bread these sacks will become is no longer just food. It's symbol, memory, proof. You turn toward the Quai des Orfèvres, where a bakery once stood with lines around the block. It's quiet now, its windows shattered the half-cold. The scent of crust lingers faintly in the doorway, mingling with the sour bite of soot and dust. The streets are scattered with remnants. A wheel of cheese trampled. A broken musket still smoking. A scarf dipped in vinegar thrown to the gutter after being used as a makeshift mask. The smells cling to each other like the people who caused them. There's steam rising from grates again. Not clean, but persistent. A return to routine already beginning. Someone's boiling water inside. Someone's sweeping broken glass. The scent of soaked oats rides the breeze, a mother somewhere, cooking for children who didn't see the smoke. Or maybe did, and need comfort anyway. You walk farther down the quay, and find a woman sitting on the edge of a barrel, peeling potatoes with dirty fingernails. She's humming. The scent is oddly calming earth starch, coal soot, and the faintest wisp of vanilla, probably from a bakery that burned slowly, rather than all at once. She nods as you pass. You nod back. No words needed. Not tonight. You cross a small footbridge to the left bank. The air feels different here. Less fire, more stone. The houses are older. Their scents are older. 2 old books, candle wax and wintered herbs tucked into ceiling cracks to keep out the damp. You pause beneath a shuttered window. The scent from within is warm leeks garlic and hard bread toasted over coals. Life goes on. And yet even here, the air carries traces of what was. Gunpowder still floats a ghost now, rather than a scream. Smoke drifts thinner, but unwilling to leave. Even the Seine seems to smell different. A deeper, darker river tonight, like it absorbed everything spilled into it. You find yourself on the steps of a small church, its doors still open. Inside, candles flicker. Incense burns. The scent is familiar. Frankincense and musty robes, comfort and dust. You stand in the doorway and watch the flames. No one speaks. No one has to. Behind you a dog barks once, then quiets. Somewhere nearby a man laughs. A real laugh, loud, startling, and then blessedly joined by another. And still the smell. Bread, ash, sweat, fear. And under that hope. It's subtle, but you catch it someone baking. Somewhere close. Likely small, possibly illegal. But it's happening. The scent is tentative. Not the bold swagger of yesterday's boulangers. This is the quiet kind. Dough rising in the dark. You close your eyes again. Inhale. Yeast, wood, new air. Paris isn't clean now. It's not free, not yet. But it's new. It's baked and burned and broken and still breathing. You step down the church stairs as the bells chime softly. Midnight. And you realise through the haze, through the grief, through the acrid crust of what the city just endured, Paris now smells like a city that survived itself. Ashes, yeast, and a republic cooling on the rack. And now the fires dim, the smoke thins. The wind off the Seine turns gentle, wrapping the city in something softer than silence. You walk slowly, steps echoing faintly against the cobbles. The scent of ash fades. The last curls of powder smoke drift upward and vanish into moonlight. What remains is bread again, simple, plain, unsweetened, still, warm in the walls of the city. You pause beneath a window. Someone is sleeping just beyond the shutters. Their breath rises with the scent of lavender and beeswax. And under it all always is Paris. Stone, dust, flower. Let it all slow now. Let the chaos of the day sink behind you, like the sun leaving only embers and the hush of a city that for a moment has exhaled. Your feet find rest. Your breath deepens. The city smells less like a riot and more like someone is starting breakfast early. Drift with that thought. Imagine the ovens lighting, the loaves forming. Imagine clean aprons, a swept floor, soft crust, breaking open in quiet hands. Let the night settle on your shoulders like a cotton shawl. Let the last whispers of smoke and yeast lull you toward sleep. Paris will wake again, but not yet. Tonight let the city rest, and you too.